Hey, folks. Today's program sponsored by one of our favorite sponsors, and they have a huge sale right now, the biggest one of the year, sunsetlakesebede.com, 30% off of all of their products with the coupon code BF for Black Friday, or short for BFD. I don't know.
Yeah.
But look, all of their stuff is on sale. The tinctures with melatonin, the different flavors of tinctures, the gummies with melatonin, the gummies with a little THC is back, their Vibes gummy. All of this on sale, 30% off with the coupon code BF. Also on sale, their smokables, their keef, their pre-rolls, 30% off, coupon code BF. The fudge, the coffee with Sebede, 30% off with coupon code BF. And get this, orders over $125 will get to choose one free 20-count jar of gummies. So you can get the melatonin ones, or you can get the new Vibe ones with 1 milligram of THC and the 30 milligrams of CBD, or just the regulars of CBD gummies. Orders over $250 will receive a free Sunset Lake CBD beanie, where you can wear, it's cold.
The cool kind of
This
beanie.
thing comes from Vermont, folks.
Yeah.
So I don't know where the beanie exactly comes from, but those are the ones they're wearing up in Vermont. So believe me, it's warm. 5% of all of their sales from the coupon code BF will not only get you a 30% discount, but it's also, they're going to donate 5% of the proceeds to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood, of course, 501c3, provides reproductive health care services, sex education, information to millions of people worldwide. And the majority report is going to match whatever that 5% of proceeds are. So check it out. sunsetlakesebede.com, 30% off with the coupon code BF. Cannot find a bigger movement partner with folks who are in business. They have donated thousands of dollars to things like strike relief funds, to carceral reform, to refugee resettlement, to food pantries, to aid for folks who got hit by the floods up in Vermont. Their farming practices are great. There's no pesticides in any of their products. They use integrated pest management. Just an all-around great company, great guys up there in the Burlington area. sunsetlakesebede.com, 30% off with coupon code BF. Check it out now. Only lasts until November 26th. Now time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, November 20th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Jonathan Graubart, professor of political science at San Diego State University, author of Jewish Self-Determination Beyond Zionism, lessons from Hannah Arendt, and other pariahs. Meanwhile, Hamas and Israel reportedly close to a deal for hostage release, as now over 13,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli attacks. Speaking of which, the IDF attacks Gaza's now Indonesian hospital as UN evacuates babies to Egypt. These are babies that were first evacuated from the Al-Shifa hospital. New Israeli strikes killed dozens at a UN school. In Argentina, far-right libertarian Javier Milei Am I saying his last name right?
Yeah.
Wins the presidential election runoff. This guy's a lunatic, both ideologically and I think also just sort of in terms of, I don't know, walking around.
Yeah, right.
Democrats in the Senate and House discuss placing conditions on Israeli aid. Biden's poll numbers are cratering as 18 to 34-year-olds overwhelmingly disapprove of his Israel-Gaza policy. Federal judge finds North Dakota, Matt, their redistricting is a Voting Rights Act violation. Feds seek to have New York City stripped of control over Rikers. Rosalind Carter dies at age 96, and American Airlines flight attendants are reportedly to announce a Christmas strike today.
Ooh.
Or I should say, they're to announce today details about a Christmas time strike. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us on this Monday. And back from her really real adventure, sounds like.
I've had a well, so I came in on Thursday, for people that don't realize. I had vomited in the morning. I thought it was just something that, acid
we don't
reflux.
have to get too
All right, well,
graphic about this.
We're not getting too graphic.
Save those details for the Twitter page.
Yeah, who put that out there? So it's the cat's out of the bag. And then Bradley comes in after me, and I'm curled up on the couch before the show on Thursday, and it just became quite clear that was not going to happen. So I think I had some food poisoning. Also, though, my mother dropped off her new puppy for me to take care of for the next 8 days. I haven't slept well in any period of time, and also I feel like she's pulled so much on the leash that both my wrists are just completely dislocated. So let's have some fun. See you out the trail on the show today.
Glad to see you're at 100% for the show. But nevertheless, great to have you back. And glad you're not vomiting all over the place.
Good. Yeah, I'm just other physical ailments.
Obviously, we got a lot of news in terms of what's going on in Gaza and in Israel. But I guess the first election, which did not provide a winner, was about a month ago in Argentina.
We had Jacob Sugarman on to talk about that back, I guess, what was it, 6 weeks ago or something like that?
A month, 6 weeks ago. I can't remember exactly. But there was a runoff this weekend in Argentina. And this right-wing lunatic, Malay, won with, I think it was 56% of the vote. Argentina, of course, has been going through enormous challenges. 140% rate of inflation. It's the third highest rate in the world. 2 in 5 Argentines now live in poverty. The value of Argentina's currency has plummeted. Milei was running against a, I don't know, what would you call him? Centrist. I guess, of the Peronist party, Massa. And we should say Milei does not have a strong contingency of his Liberty Advances party. They hold just 7 of 72 seats in the Argentinian Senate, and 38 of the 257 seats in the House. What's this clip that we have of him? This
gives a sense of how crazy he is. He's basically like a libertarian type of
celebrity,
provocateur.
Provocateur.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this is him dressed in his alter ego.
All I can say is that I think folks have. We interviewed a couple of people who ran for the Libertarian nomination back in 2016, I think it was, or 2020. I can't remember.
2016, yeah.
And this guy could have just fit right in with that stage. On that stage, he wants to get rid of the Argentinian currency and the central bank, but he wants to basically not. He wants to supplant his currency with the U.S. dollar, get rid of their central bank,
This is from
outlaw
yeah.
abortion. The list goes on.
Libertarian
He's-
policy of outline abortion.
Yeah,
Exactly.
he has invoked this is from Sugarman's piece, the neoclassical economist Milton Friedman arguing it was the moral responsibility of business owners to earn as much as they could. He's
Gordon Gekko.
He's a libertarian, but a weirdo.
And also sort of downplays, I guess, the violence under the Pinochet regime as well.
Well, just to state that 30,000 people killed in the terror under Pinochet, and that's that sort of thing. You do that to a left or just journalists and teachers, you might lead to a situation where you're electing a guy like this down the line.
And this is another quote, just really briefly, from The Economist. They asked him in an interview, "Are you going to privatize public companies?" Millet, "Yes." The Economist, "All of them?" Javier Millet, "As much as I can." So that's the agenda here.
And yeah, just to expand on Matt's point, our involvement in Central and Latin America in destroying democracies, there are scars that in many respects can't heal properly. And I have no doubt that you could draw a direct line between this election and essentially what this country did 50 years ago in terms of Argentina. Here is the new Argentinian president.
For folks listening, he's wearing a cape. I think this is his
ANCAP.
man.
Yeah.
General ANCAP. And we should be
ANCAP,
clear.
anarcho-capitalists.
This is, yes.
Yeah.
And to be clear, this is not footage of him, at some party, 20 years ago or something. This is him on the campaign trail from, when was this? Just like,
He's done this like about 10 times since 2019 on when he's been campaigning.
Dragon Ball Z guy in the background too. I'm not sure what that was a reference to, but yeah, great.
there you go.
That's
So
not good.
we'll see. But yes.
Daryl Perry is going to be I think
Right. Yeah, exactly. We will be talking to somebody in the coming weeks on the implications of this. But for now, we just wanted to give you a heads up. In a moment, we're going to be talking to San Diego State University professor of political science, Jonathan Graubart, who has written Jewish Self-Determination Beyond Zionism, Lessons from Hannah Arendt and Other Pariahs, which has become even more timely, obviously, because of the events of the past couple of months. First, word from our sponsors. At the grocery store, you can get pecans, but might you not want bourbon pecans, sweet and spicy pecans, pecan brittle, butter toffee pecans? If you have any inkling for any of those, head to nuts.com to see the hundreds of different varieties of nuts they offer. And frankly, also check out the nuts that are just like
Yeah. How did those
full-on straight
cashews inch closer and closer to your side of the desk?
Don't know how that happened.
You've been asking for a few, and now I see.
That's
I've been
weird.
gone a few
Somebody-
days.
Somebody must have
Somebody
moved
put them on
those.
your side?
That is
That's
really
odd,
strange.
yeah.
I'm flanked by almonds and cashews. But right now, when you go to nuts.com/majority, new customers get a free gift with a purchase and free shipping of orders of $29 or more. Nuts.com is your one-stop shop for freshly roasted nuts, dried fruit, sweets, pantry staples like specialty flours, and more. Great time to stock up before the holidays. They also make great gifts, frankly. Their wide selection means there's something for everybody. At nuts.com, quality is a top priority. They roast their nuts and pop their corn the same day it ships, so they reach you deliciously fresh. Satisfaction is guaranteed. We've gone through, I barely had any of those cashews.
Oh, yeah.
But the almonds and the mixed nuts, they're delicious. They're incredibly fresh. And the beauty of nuts.com is they've got just a huge variety of nuts there. Get it all done. One-stop shopping for any of those. What you call those, sundries? I don't know, but they're great. They have gluten-free options. They have organic choices. They have like stuff that's more diet friendly. Doesn't matter. Sweet, savory, cooking essentials. You're going to find something there at nuts.com. You could shop a la carte at any time, or you can get auto deliveries so you never run out of your favorite items, like
cashews.
Maybe. I don't
thought
honestly have
experiment.
no idea how those got over here. That's weird. But if you're stocked up at home, also, they sell directly to businesses. Right now, nuts.com is offering new customers a free gift, the purchase and free shipping on orders of $29 or more at nuts.com/majority. Stock up for the holidays, folks. Go check out all the delicious options at nuts.com/majority. You're going to receive a free gift and free shipping when you spend $29 or more. Also, great gift for all holidays. And they've done it. This place has really figured out. If you have parents, you know the one thing they want is to hear from you at the holidays or see you. And if you have kids, and you know your parents want to see those kids, well, this holiday season, you can call them, you can FaceTime them, and give them an Aura digital picture frame. It's a really amazing way to keep in touch. And, you know, these digital picture frames have been around for a long time, but they Aura has really sort of nailed it. Both nailed it in terms of like the look of the frames. Some of these frames are just really extremely attractive looking. The old frames used to look like they were a computer monitor and would look nasty, but these frames look great. And for staying in touch with your parents and sending them kids pictures of your grandkids, of their grandkids, this is a really easy way to do it. And also, it means that, like, you know, for some of us who don't necessarily want to be in constant contact with our parents, I can send pictures, you know, to my dad of my kids and of me, and feel like I'm reaching out without actually having to have any response.
Good.
Other than like a text, like, I got that picture. Thank you. That looks great. No, of course, it doesn't supplant it. I'm not suggesting that other people don't necessarily want to talk to their parents on a regular basis. That's great. But this is, this honestly is the best digital frame that I've ever come across. Because over the years, I've tried different ones.
Also, it's a good gift because it's personal.
It's personal. But here's the amazing thing about it. You can preload pictures on it without even taking it out of the box.
Wow.
And they give you, there's two different ways you can do it. When you have the box, you can just do a, what is that code thing? What is the
QR code?
QR code, and load the pictures from an app on your phone. The app is really easy to use, super convenient. Or you can even do it by just getting a link to your machine before it's even set up. So as soon as they plug it in, it just fills up. I mean, that's what I find really amazing about this. Aura Frames was named the best digital photo frame by Wirecutter. Fast Company said this simple, stylish digital picture frame can replace social media in your life. That would be nice.
Yeah.
So the next time you need to call your parents, you can send them a new pic of you from that trip you've been telling them about, or your kids, or whatever it is, all right from your phone. It's super easy for those on the gift receiving end who may not be the most technically advanced. Makes it really, really easy. From now through Black Friday and Cyber Monday, Aura is having their best deal of the year. Listeners can save $40 on their best-selling Carver matte frame. Like I say, these things really look like frames. By visiting auraframes.com/majority. That's AURA frames.com/majority. Use the promo code majority, get $40 off their best-selling frames. Terms and conditions apply. We will put the podcast, the links in the YouTube and podcast descriptions. Check it out. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Jonathan Graubart, professor of political science at San Diego State University, author of Jewish Self-Determination Beyond Zionism, Lessons from Hannah Arendt and Other Pariahs. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Jonathan Graubart, professor of political science at San Diego State University, author of Jewish Self-Determination Beyond Zionism, Lessons from Hannah Arendt and Other Pariahs. Jonathan, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
This is, I find this, your writing here, personally fascinating, in terms of like my own experience and searching, but obviously, there's a lot of people, I think, wrestling with the questions, that you discuss in your book, particularly now, and also are sort of like looking around for what is, and I think any solution to what's going on there is probably, decades, a matter of decades, but at least a sort of like a beacon or a place, a direction to head in. But let's just start with, I'm curious as to like what, and you wrote this book obviously months ago. This has been a project that you've been working on for quite a while. What made you look into this sort of like these? I guess the competing forms of Zionism, or to the extent that there was any sort of dissent within Zionism in its earlier stages, what inspired you to write this?
Well, I've known about them for a couple decades. In particular, I've long been a fan of Hannah Arendt, and then later of Judah Magnus and Martin Buber. I knew of them, and in the back of my mind, I would think about, Zionism once upon a time did not necessarily mean a hegemonic Jewish state, meaning some kind of Jewish supremacy. So I've been wanting to get them in for a while, and I think it's really just cumulative despair over the past 10 years, probably also combined with becoming a full professor and having more flexibility to write more expansive topics. So between all that, the despair of what's going on and the idea that we really need a profound re-examination of what went wrong and what we want from Jewish self-determination.
I know you've written about the issues that I think are facing people on college campuses in terms of like even discussing these topics. And I think
Yes.
you yourself, I think, have been sort of, canceled for speaking engagements that you were to have.
Attempted cancellations, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know how that panned out, but so the idea of being a tenured professor, I imagine, was fairly relevant in the idea of writing, of examining this. All right, so let's start with just sort of, because you're looking at what is known as maybe humanist Zionism for I don't know, and I'm not sure exactly the term, like who developed that specific term. But will you talk about what, when we go back to like the late 1800s, earliest 20th century, and this would be more, Buber's era, Hannah Arendt comes a little bit later. Give us a notion of like what the disparate strains of Zionism were and how legit were they in terms of strains within that ideology.
Well, dating back from early 20th century, there's one is kind of a cultural Zionism, which might at first be the strongest one. That's not yet conscious or explicitly calling for a Jewish nation state, but just a Jewish community revival in the historic Holy Land for Jews, so what was called Palestine then. So there's cultural Zionism. With Theodor Herzl, he's moving, so he's kind of the modern founder of Zionism. He is moving toward something that looks more like a nation state. So that's, you can say, a generic statist Zionism. It takes actually several decades later, by the 1920s, for there to be the hardline revisionist Zionism that Jabotinsky started, and Netanyahu is part of that. But also, what really takes off around the time of World War I, including with Martin Buber, is these Jewish Central Europeans who are torn by what nationalism and imperialism has done to Europe and also has done to the Jewish community in Central and Eastern Europe. And so they're thinking of something that builds off cultural Zionism, but has a broader ambitions. And so I use the term Hebrew humanism just because Martin Buber was the mentor. And Buber had this concept called Hebrew humanism, which was kind of an independent, spiritual, socialist, egalitarian approach that linked Jewish and non-Jewish values.
And what was the idea of that brand of Zionism, I guess, in sort of like, or to the extent that it ever became like a practical vision?
Well, the practical vision was to settle in Palestine. Certainly, Buber and his allies are influential on the kibbutzim, which were the Jewish collective agricultural cooperatives. And so, yeah, they wanted to actually produce this new society. And so, that was the practical element of realizing it. Their aspiration ultimately was some kind of binational federation, which would be an alternative to the horrors that nationalism and imperialism had created in Europe and certainly globally. And so the end goal was twofold. One was a Jewish communal living that one could be proud of and that would reinvigorate Jewish life throughout the globe. And secondly was a binational federation where Jews exist as equal citizens, aiming for kind of a common just society.
At that time, like what was and my understanding is Buber did not actually even make it to Palestine until he was like in his 60s, I guess. But did that strain of Zionism at that time have a sort of a roadmap as to how developed was the sort of the practical implications? And I also wonder how much of that was, well, I want to hear that first and then and get a sense of how that was, how the Balfour Declaration, impacted that.
Well, it starts off with a plea to the mainstream Zionist community to actually try to live with Palestinians rather than to be segmented and to see the Palestinians as the problem. So it starts off as just a plea to learn about Palestinians, to coexist with Palestinians. And by the 1930s, there's then movement into thinking about concrete federations, so combining autonomous communal living with shared joint organizations. This starts the late 1920s, including supporting the idea for a joint Congress in Palestine, where there would be is separate seats reserved for both the Jews and the Arabs, but also combined seats. So there was increasingly more sophisticated federalist institutions, and they get more developed into the mid 30s through the next decade.
What provided the leverage at that time for Zionists? I mean, because there was not a huge population there at that time. Was it just simply that the British, who were then sort of in control of the area, I mean, maybe talk to where that leverage came from, I guess, that they could say oh, here's the plan. It's a plan that is inclusive of everybody. But I mean, on some level, the Palestinians could have been yeah, but why is it including you? You're not here.
Right. Yeah. So the leverage, I mean, you mean the leverage for the dissenting Zionists, the humanist Zionists?
I'm saying just the leverage from the Zionists in general.
Okay.
And then, then we can talk about the leverage for the dissenting Zionists.
Okay, good. All right. So the leverage for the mainstream Zionists, what Chaim Weizmann, right, who certainly knew British politics quite well, their leverage was we could be good for you, Brits. We're someone who basically likes you. We can be kind of your Western ears in Palestine, so we can help the British Empire. And the other appeal was to Christian attitudes of prominent Brits, including Lord Balfour, who writes the famous Balfour Declaration, that this was something true to Christian values. But primarily, the argument was we could be a really good asset for you in Palestine. So that was the leverage they had. And they used it to certainly get the Balfour Declaration, which then meant that they were able to set up a government. They were able to get immigration. They were able to acquire land. The one thing they couldn't quite do, they realized the British wouldn't go that far, is they couldn't quite get the Brits to say we're going to support a Jewish state, because the Brits still needed to have good relations with both the Arabs in Palestine, but equally, or if not more importantly, the Arabs in the neighboring countries. So the humanist Zionists become useful for the Brits when they're calling for some kind of alternative arrangement that doesn't mean a Jewish nation state.
Can you expand on just really briefly the strategic value that the Brits saw in the situation, and the fact that Zionists at the time went along with it and were happy to participate in it?
Well, the strategic value, I suppose, is twofold. One is actually having a organized community that at that point is very pro-British, is very pro-Western in orientation. And so in a part of the world that's of geostrategic importance to Great Britain. So that's the main value. The second value was general perceived political influence of the Jewish community. I mean, one motivation for the Brits for supporting the Balfour Declaration is they hoped this would appeal to the American Jewish community and would put pressure on President Wilson to join World War I. So there was that. I don't know if the British were very sophisticated. I think they were overstating, A, the American Jewish support for Zionism, and B, their influence over Wilson. But their connections, they certainly had real connections, the Jewish community. So they looked to them as kind of a transnational asset as well.
And so, I mean, definitionally, it sounds like it was part of an imperialist project, right? I mean, by the British, and the Zionists at that point become sort of the agents. I mean, they get what they want to, but they're serving. If Britain did not have Well, I mean, if Britain did not have imperialistic tendencies, I guess they wouldn't have control of that land either.
Right.
But certainly, if they were not still actively engaged in that process, as opposed to say like 1960s when they're sort of they're receding on some level, there was an active attempt to expand for expansion.
There was, yes. Yes, the Brits were not planning to go away, right? That's a difficult decision they take only after World War II. And so they are still looking to expand. This is great with the end of the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East.
Right. Okay. And so let's with that sort of table set and the leverage for the humanist Zionist strand of Zionism is that it gives the British what they want, but without necessarily the building of a state, which they don't want in that instance, because it would be too controversial with making it harder for them to play off other allies. Let's just, I want to take a step back, and I probably should have asked this earlier, but why, I mean, Buber represents this one strand. Why Hannah Arendt? Why do you look at these two primarily? There are other thinkers that you also engage with, but why them in particular? Is it simply because they are the most recognizable proponents of these ideas of Zionism?
Well, for Arendt, I simply think that she's got the sharpest insights. And she's in particular stands out as the outstanding Jewish iconoclast who's still a Zionist at that point. So I think she represents an important strand, but it's also because the power of her ideas. She's certainly the best at diagnosing the pathologies of the prevailing Zionist approach. So to me, she's an obvious choice. It's true that she wasn't one of the political leaders, so it's more her sharp commentary from the outside. Buber's the more obvious choice. He's certainly both the intellectual and moral mentor for the bulk of these binationalist Zionists, who I call the humanist Zionists. It's true, there's others I could have brought up, certainly Judah Magnus. Magnus, however, wasn't a deep thinker in the way Arendt and Buber were. And so I think they work the best. It's true, but in terms of sharp insight, sharp criticism, I think she's the outstanding member of these dissenting binationalists.
Before we get into her ideas and her analysis of what as you say, the pathologies of Zionism were at that time, what was there? Did they have a relationship, and to the extent that they did, like how much of what Arendt's thinking was built on Buber's, or what was their interplay?
They don't seem to have much of an influence on each other. Arendt mentions Buber in passing a couple times. The critical figure for both of them is Judah Magnus. Judah Magnus was the one, he was the founder of Hebrew University. So he's an American Jewish rabbi that moves to Palestine in the 1920s. So he's really the most active on the ground. And he and Buber develop a close friendship that gets even closer when Buber settles in Palestine in 1938. Magnus comes across one of Arendt's ideas for a federation, for federalism. So Magnus and Arendt get close in the early 1940s. And so Magnus is the bridge between Arendt and Buber.
And did either Buber or Arendt, and then we'll get into Arendt, how much of their agenda was affirmative and how much of it was reacting to what they saw as problematic about the existing Zionism at their times?
Well, the way I see it is that Buber is more affirmative than reacting. Maybe that's why he was better regarded among the prevailing Zionist leadership. So when at his death in 1965, Ben Gurion's there, the Israeli president, so top Israeli politicians are honoring him. No one's honoring Hannah Arendt among the Israeli elites when she dies a decade later. So so that's where they stand, Arendt and Buber.
Oh, and let's talk about Arendt's sort of, I guess it's both critique of the prevailing Zionism of her time and an alternative view within Zionism.
Right. Yeah. So I wanted to point out that Arendt devotes more space toward the critical. So she's the one, again, with the sharper edge. So she saw two foundational pathologies for the prevailing Zionism. One she called the eternal anti-Semitism syndrome, which holds that the outsiders are always just looking to basically destroy the Jews. They're just looking for opportunities. So context doesn't matter. It's more that it's demonic. And a related pathology she played up was tribal nationalism. This was not something unique to Jews, she argued, but the idea that tribal nationalism is your national group cannot coexist in the same territory with another national group. There's no possibility for cooperation because the people are so fundamentally different. So she worried that among the prevailing Jewish Zionist community, there was this view that the whole world's going to be violently anti-Semitic, and there's nothing the Jews can do to change that other than to form their own states. And the tribal nationalism is you can't cooperate with others, whether it's the Palestinians or anyone else, other than realpolitik, so politics of convenience, but no substantive cooperation is possible. And so she argued with those two pathologies, then it was going to be very difficult for what she saw as some of the exciting qualities of Zionism to prevail. So the whole Jewish renewal, the development of the kibbutzim, which she also supported, all those things were great, but they were being undermined by these primary pathologies.
And that in the first instance was that you're going to perceive this, speaking to Zionists, you're going to perceive this as some type of solution to anti-Semitism, and it's not going to be. Exactly. And the second being that the way you're going about this is also going to be problematic.
Right. Yeah.
What was it that, I mean, why was for someone like Hannah Arendt, not being a Zionist not an option? Like, I mean, where was there what was it? What was the allure that kept her within the framework of Zionism, but even though opposing the strain of Zionism that we ultimately got?
Well, Arendt is greatly influenced by the rise to power of the Nazis. Right? She has a PhD, but here by 1933. She realizes she can't practice her profession. Her original advisor, Heidegger, who was very influential, the fact that he could cooperate with the Nazi regime. So all that really made her think, and the need to be politically active. Her first husband is a Jewish communist, and so she's at one point a fellow traveler with communists, but with the emergence of Nazism, she's looking for some kind of active Jewish politics. And so she is attracted to Zionism and that it's a political movement on behalf of the Jews. And it is actually practical in a way. It's going there. She gets a job in Paris in 1933, helping German and other European teenagers make it to Palestine. So she likes that part. And then as she learns about the different experiments going on, including the kibbutzim, including provision of healthcare, she praises. All those things make her a Zionist, and she never abandons calling herself a Zionist. It's maybe a little bit ironic in that she's become she's become cited and invoked by many anti-Zionists, but she never left the Zionist fold. So she's in that position. I find very interesting that she does want some kind of Jewish self-determination to succeed, but she's certainly very disappointed and troubled by what it's turning into.
Before we get to that, sort of like where some of what she's reacting to, but talk a little bit about what do we mean when we say Jewish self-determination at that time?
Well, Jewish self-determination meant some kind of autonomous development. So education, both Arendt and Buber are excited about the establishment of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, which would compile, build on Jewish thought and link it toward universal thinking. And so developing just new Jewish cultural and Jewish political institutions, educational institutions. So it meant developing a community with political, socioeconomic, cultural elements in a way that certainly interacts with the broader community. But it was having separate, at least an autonomous revitalization of Jewish values, of Jewish ways of life.
And this is coming out of an era where there is Jews are in some instances. I mean, I guess there was emancipation in like the 1860s, was it? I think in Germany. And through Europe to some extent, but there was a, I don't know, 3/4 citizenship essentially, or 5/8. I mean, is that the context in which this is developed? Because, I'm also curious where Buber has this idea of, we need to have, move into this neighborhood, but respect essentially the autonomy of our neighbors, but yet, there's an inherent contradiction there to a certain extent.
Right. Yeah. All right. So in the first part, Arendt, certainly in her Origins of Totalitarianism, she develops and elaborates upon the difficult, tenuous relationship that Jews in Europe had with full citizenship. And for her, it's also a commentary and criticism of the Jewish notables. So the Jewish notables in Europe preferred their privileged status. They got to be more or less the representatives for the Jewish community to the leadership. And so they weren't always supportive of full Jewish citizenship. And Arendt also worried that the broader Jewish community was still so distrustful of the European community at large that they weren't working to develop as citizens. And so that element, it's true that also from the outside, there's reversals in full Jewish citizenship, but Arendt is just as important for describing the not very helpful attitude that particularly the Jewish notables took toward the prospects of citizenship. And so that element again explains why she's attracted at first to the Zionists, as it is a seemingly Jewish egalitarian movement that's looking for Jews to be political agents. For Buber, Yeah, it does come down to, he does understand that since it's mostly European Jews that are settling into Palestine, which is 90+% Arab, that the Jewish community are going to be the intruders. He's a Zionist in terms of thinking that, well, the Jewish people have this historic connection, and we do need this too, and there is room enough for both of us. But we do have to understand that it is going to be an intrusion. Therefore, it's incumbent the Jewish migrants to Palestine to reach out to Palestine's Arabs and to develop this synthesis where both communities can develop their own self-determination without it breaking down into a zero-sum game, and affirmatively developing kind of a synthesis for a new way that national groups can coexist and help each other.
Well, how did that break down then? And then militarism comes into the fore.
Well, I mean, Buber had a lot of trouble convincing the prevailing Zionist community to have this kind of coexistence. So in a way, that's part of the tragedy, is that the humanist Zionist project runs against just sort of the power of conventional nationalism. And it's true also for Palestine's Arabs. They are still seeing the prevailing Zionist Jewish community as not only intruders, but ones that want to take over the land and want to form an overwhelming majority. So Buber, Judah Magnus, and others certainly interacted well with Palestinian Arabs. They both lived in Arab parts of Jerusalem. But from the Palestinian Arab perspective, while they were personally friendly toward people like Buber and people like Judah Magnus, they did think twofold. One, it's not fair. We've been the overwhelming majority. Why are you calling for a binational coexistence? We can accept Jews as a minority with collective rights, but not as a equal relationship. The second thing, particularly by the 1940s, where some might see the writing on the wall and that the Jewish community is better organized and does have now a more powerful military capability, there was the correct presumption that Buber, the humanist Zionist, did not have enough support to make it work. So that's ultimately where it breaks down, that it turns out that there's not enough support either way.
So, and Arendt, because, she's obviously born decades after Buber, she has this sort of advantage of hindsight and sort of a clearer sense of like where the trajectory is going. It's still, I'm not clear, like at that point, I mean, I guess, very much of the time as to why she retained a sort of an affirmative Zionist, like she could see some other future, but she certainly saw, or at least had a sense that this was highly problematic. Will you give us a sense of like what her warnings essentially were about where she felt Zionism could be heading?
Yeah, her warnings are the militarism part. I'll just read part of one quotation from her that's very powerful. This is getting into the war of 1948. And even if the Jews were to win the war, its end would find the unique possibilities and the unique achievements of Zionism in Palestine destroyed. The, quote, victorious Jews would live surrounded by an entirely hostile Arab population, secluded inside ever-threatened borders, absorbed with physical self-defense to a degree that would submerge all other interests and activities. The growth of a Jewish culture would cease to be the concern of the people. Social experiments would have to be discarded as impractical luxuries. Political thought would center around military strategy. So she's torn in general. I mean, she's, in a way, she's writing essays that are both very alarming, of just what the Zionist community is becoming, just how militarist and this development of a siege mentality and what's this new state going to look like that's forged in warfare. On the other hand, as late as 1948, she is looking for these moments of hope. With Judah Magnus, she's appealing for a UN trusteeship. And then there she is calling for developing this decentralized federated institutions under a trusteeship. And she ends one essay that there is still hope. So she keeps that hope, I think, until maybe 1949. And then her writing is becoming, Judah Magnus dies in 1948. The right-wing militarists kill Count Bernadotte, who was trying to redress the refugee problem. So those two things lead her to despair without ever renouncing Zionism altogether, but her hopes and with, let's say, the end of the 1948 war. But it's interesting, even in the middle of 1948, she is still perhaps clinging to a last hope that's maybe we can pull back from it getting so ugly. So it's heartening or disheartening, I suppose, reading those essays in the few years where there's great hopes, but great fears, and her great fears, unfortunately, get realized.
How would you assess her warning? I mean, it certainly feels like militarism became, and security, as they put it, became a fundamental part of Israeli existence. And the social experiments seem to fall by the wayside and get supplanted by really sort of like a more neoliberal, market-driven innovations, I guess, rather than social experiments. But how would you assess her, I don't know if it was a prediction as much as it was a warning?
I'd say her prediction is now becoming, all the more true by 2023, and it's become true for a number of decades. I think she overstates it if we're sort of looking back even in the 1960s. Because I have a section on Noam Chomsky, so the younger Noam Chomsky of the late 1960s, early 1970s. He's not naive. I mean, he certainly knows all the things that Israel has done to Palestine's Arabs. But some of those socialist institutions do persevere. So there is that element that's still exciting people about Israel, maybe into the 1970s, at least the first part of the 1970s. But the contradictions there right away. So even while some of these interesting social democratic institutions do endure, the Palestinians, right, are marginalized. And so the roots, of what's now called apartheid or Jewish supremacy are set there right at the beginning. So there's that contradiction right away. And I'd say Arendt proves correct in the long term that these contradictions are going to lead more and more into those ugly elements. It just wasn't overnight that all of their social experiments dissolved.
Well, right. I mean, there's the like things that can be lauded, of course, about like the construction of the Israeli state in terms of like things like healthcare, right? But then it's the exclusionary element that begins to take over, and it completely undercuts that stuff. So, I mean, what is your estimation of, you said the 70s, is that where you believe it begins to turn in that way?
I'd say so. Certainly with the Likud party getting elected in 1977, it symbolically marks the end of at least one appealing element that had semi-survived the social democratic, and you could say even some kind of appealing humanist element. But with as Menachem Begin comes into power and the Labor Party So the Labor Party of that it's no longer believing in the old socialist elements. I think that's a convenient, and it does emerge with the growth of neoliberalism in the West in the late 1970s.
Let's talk about. I don't know. Is it? It's obviously easier to assess this in hindsight than in the moments over these years. But was there ever a chance of like what Buber or Arendt, to the extent that she had an affirmative vision, was there really ever a chance for that, or were the circumstances that allowed Israel to exist sort of like it was baked into the DNA that this was going to lead to where we are? I mean, as an imperial outpost, essentially, could it have ever been anything but?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult question. I would say that they probably didn't have a chance to win out on the idea of a binational state, just because the type of nationalism it proposed, where there's not a zero-sum game of coexistence, went against not only the trends of Zionism, but against Arab nationalism. However, I'd say that some of their elements of thinking about what would be a more decent state. So Buber, by 1949, is now kind of moving on to thinking, okay, it's a state of Israel now. I'm not going to propose the binational thing anymore, but how can we certainly come up with a just resolution for the refugee situation? How can we bring about equality of the remaining Palestinian Arab population in the state of Israel? And how can we create a more just society? I'd say there were steps along the way, and one of my chapters kind of looks at possibilities where they still would have had a Jewish state in the conventional sense, but they could have had peaceful relations with the neighboring Arab states and worked out a deal with Palestine's Arabs that would not have broken it. So there were elements along the way. I would say that Arendt's diagnosis of these pathologies that they couldn't shake keep getting in the way. This element that if it's tribal nationalism and eternal anti-Semitism, then you can't give any ground. So I suppose it's these fundamental pathologies, the need for a conventional Jewish nation state that keeps preventing more just prospects. And this goes on even with the prospects of a two-state, right? After the 1967 war, certainly Israel's in a very strong position. And just from conventional Israeli interest, agreeing to a Palestinian state would not have hurt it strategically or economically, but these fundamental pathologies of never giving in get in the way. So that's why your question's difficult. I guess it does come down to breaking down these pathologies. And, that's still the problem in 2023 is this mindset is still with Israeli Jews and among Jews in the United States and the diaspora that still identify so closely with Israeli policies and with conventional Zionism.
I mean, it feels fruitless to ask like what is possible with what exists right now. I mean, but it also feels like, we're doing this interview. We gotta ask that question on some level. I know you write about Edward Said's Reformation notions, but also that was from, also a different era on the trajectory of where we are now. Like what, it seems impossible to imagine a two-state solution with the 700,000 illegal settlers in the West Bank. It also seems hard to imagine a one-state solution, but it also seems hard to imagine that the status quo, this idea that, Israel's going to mow the lawn every now and then, or, continue to suppress and occupy millions of people ad infinitum, it also seems unlikely. If there is a way out of this, what do you see it as?
Yeah, I mean, you're correct that right now there's nothing promising, at least on a large scale, on the horizon. And so it seems now pointless to even talk about, okay, are you more of a two-state advocate or a one-state advocate? I think one does need this transformation or reformation of just what does it mean of Jewish self-determination. So, look, I take hope in that, at least in the United States. So, the United States is roughly tied with Israel for the largest Jewish population. There's certain among the Jewish community, not among the established Jewish organizations, but among the population at large, particularly those under 40. And so, if among the Jewish community, there's now an openness toward humanizing the Palestinians, looking back at the Nakba. I mean, something like the Nakba, I don't think I knew the term, the Nakba, when I'm in college back in the 1980s. I'd known somehow that Palestinians had to flee, but, the line then was it was mostly their fault. Now, I think among young Jews who have any interest in the topic, they take it for granted that the Nakba happened. That was an awful thing. And they take it for granted that there is this fundamental contradiction between a Jewish state and a democratic state. So I take primary hope in that you've had this big change in the American Jewish community. Granted, within Israel, looks to be going more the opposite direction, in that including young Israeli Jews are becoming more hardline. And so there, I don't have an easy out other than to note that one does need some kind of transformation among the Jewish community. There certainly are groups in Israel like Breaking the Silence, Association for Civil Rights in Israel, the Human Rights Group at Salem, those who put together 972 magazine. So there are these pockets of Jewish activists who are interacting. You probably know about the initiative of A Land for All, which is made up of Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arab citizens that are coming up with this blueprint of general principles, where it would be a confederation of two states based on the 1967 border, so a Jewish state of Israel and a Palestinian Arab states. But there would be open borders. One would be able to work in either community. So the problem of, say, 500, 600, 700,000 Israeli settlers in itself is not an issue if they actually want to just live in Palestine for spiritual, cultural reasons. The same way for Palestinians who descend from refugees, they want to be close to their home communities, even if they can't be citizens of this new state of Israel under this confederation. They would have travel and employment rights. Granted, this is all still just speculative hope, but I think you have a growing number of Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews kind of thinking through what it would.
Well,
you add.
Are the
Yeah.
Sorry, no.
No, it's I am curious though, because the idea of these Israeli settlers, the 700,000 settlers, agreeing to basically live in Palestinian territory and there being border crossings and it being maybe Israel-Palestine, right? Like I think a one-state solution is really the only path forward. That there would have to be real truth and reconciliation and major seismic changes in the legality of these kinds of settlements, because it's the Israeli settlers in Palestinian territory, in those borders that you describe, are the most right-wing in the entire country.
Yeah, this is a big problem. And look, I think the one thing that's the hardest to confront is Israeli Jews would need to do a full reckoning, right, of what was done and what is being done to Palestinians. That's certainly not something that's easy from any society. And so the settlers, are a big obstacle. Look, I think it's going to have to be some kind of broader transformation. To me, it seems the vanguard would be those Israeli Jews who are actively working with Palestinians, even now are still bravely kind of condemning the current onslaughts, and who are interacting in protest and resistance with Palestinians, along with an increasingly sizable American Jewish community. The settlers are going to be perhaps the last bastion. It's true that I remember I did a tour once, it was a decade ago, of Ariel, one of the settlements that's was built precisely to be an obstacle toward a contiguous West Bank. But the person who was showing us around and was doing a propaganda tour for Ariel, he said, even if Ariel became a state of Palestine, they should want to keep the factories redeveloped. So I was struck by that. I don't want to make too much of that because you're right, Emma, that the settlers, by and large, are the most hardline elements. But if one looks for possibilities of broader change, then even for those settlers that are willing to live in a much different arrangement, and like Noam Chomsky has talked about this in the past, that if settlers are told, okay, you need to make your peace with this new state of Palestine, you can decide, do you want to stay in Israel, or do you want to work out a deal where you're no longer getting all the bulk of the resources, the bulk of the water? And so there'd be that. But the settlers do represent the most significant problem that has to be overcome. I can't say I or anyone else has an easy solution. To me, it does have to come from the vanguard elements and then to spread outward.
When you cite American Jewry changing, and my experience is very similar to yours in terms of having any awareness of 1948 or what led up to that, growing up, whether it was in college or Hebrew school, whatever it was. But is it American Jewry, or is it American Jewry in providing at least the moral authority for political elements in this country to condition our aid to the extent that, Israel's got now these leases off of these oil leases off of Gaza, and they're going to be getting revenue ultimately from the Ben Gurion Canal, which could theoretically supplant, but they don't have the ability to sort of at this point, anyways, to mass produce the missiles needed for the Iron Dome. Is that essentially the how it will work? Is that this is not going to? There may be a vanguard in Israel, but there is not a critical mass. And certainly the trajectory hasn't been in that direction for them to move in a different direction unless U.S. uses its leverage to the extent that it has any anymore, and also its ability to sort of nurture nascent developing elements of that vanguard.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think when most of us American Jews who are very troubled by Israel's policies and by the U.S. support and by the support of American Jewish establishments, we do rightly think our value added is to convey not in our name, that this is not being pro-Jewish to just kind of keep supporting Israeli militarism and the happy coexistence between U.S. militarism and Israeli militarism. So that's our value added, is it's not being done on behalf of Jews, and it gives more validation, more legitimacy for criticism. It makes non-Jews just a little bit more comfortable doing sharp criticisms without being denounced as anti-Semitic. So that is our top value, and not just in the United States, in Europe too. But I do think Israelis do still look to Americans and to the American Jewish community as support, but also as some kind of benchmark of what's going on. I know there's also lots of suspicion, but I think that element could, has potential for not the right-wing Israelis, like not most of the settlers, but for a broader left of center elements that would go beyond just the vanguard now.
The coalitions that we saw maybe mobilizing against the autocratic rule in the earlier, and whether they're at least that's the pond, as it were, where one would fish, I guess.
Yes.
Lastly, let me just ask you this. Is the road to a two-state solution and a one-state solution more or less the same for the first 5 years, let's say? I mean, like, is what would be needed for either one of those outcomes seems to me to be more or less the same for, the first decade, which is to provide resources and support for the development and of both a civil sort of society within, Gaza and the West Bank, and also sort of like a physical, just like repair as well.
In that sense, yes, it probably would be more or less the same. Maybe it's more or less the same in terms of condemning settlements. Because another thing I do is international law. So in my final chapter, I do make a plea not to just abandon all two-state advocacy. So don't confuse two-state advocacy with the Oslo process that I argue was warped from the beginning. But in so much as there was this global consensus that was worked out by the late 1970s that called for an independent Palestinian state, and that called the settlements and the perpetuation of the occupation as not only illegal, but the primary obstacle. All that's part of what's broadly called the two-state global consensus. So I think there's reason to keep using that leverage that you get from repeated UN resolutions. Sometimes they're even repeated at the UN Security Council, the rare times the US will abstain. And so the only thing I worry about once to just completely reject any kind of talk of two-state is you're disarming yourself from some very useful international law, UN kind of resolutions that will influence, say, people that are groups that are more in the middle, like many governments.
That's really interesting and a fascinating perspective. Really appreciate the book.
Thank you.
Jewish Self-Determination Beyond Zionism, Lessons from Hannah Arendt and Other Pariahs. Jonathan Graubart, we will put a link to your book at majority.fm and in our podcast and YouTube description. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, great. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half, as it were. Remember, it's your support that makes the show possible. You can become a member by going to the jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, but you also get the fun half and the ability and today in our members post at majority.fm, in our members post, you got to go to the website, log in. Although in the next day or two, we're going to send an email with this link as well. You will get a special 10% discount link.
What?
To shop.majorityreportradio.com, where we have new merch.
New merch.
Just in time for the holidays, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're a member, you get 10% discount. It's not a huge discount, but it's pretty good. And considering that our margins are razor thin on our merch, because all our merch is union made, American made.
Good quality. The new merch, we should say, is there's a Whoopsie t-shirt.
Of course, the famous Whoopsie t-shirt.
I like this new merch because it's, like
Whoopsie.
That one. I didn't even know we were doing. And
it's very Emma-centric.
Well, I had the idea for the calendar shirt. I mean, I think it was my idea, right?
This is Emma taking credit for every idea under the sun.
What'd you say, Matt?
Emma once again taking credit for every idea under the sun.
I mean,
Emma
Bill
was the one
Gates
who
of
said,
intellectual property.
I'm building my case.
What about T-shirts?
For seizure.
That's what Emma was like. T-shirts or
She invented T-shirts.
I did. Many people are saying, but there's the one that says it's the calendar on the. It says Fun Day Monday, Newsday Tuesday, Hump Day, and Majority Report, Casual Friday.
Yep.
Boom.
And we should say the Whoopsie would have never existed were it not for you triggering Tim Pool.
That's true.
I mean, Whoopsie's so big now, just in general.
I know.
In the vernacular, you hear people say it all the time now.
My friends say it to me now, just, like in response to normal discourse. And I just feel like, wow, I've really impressed them. This is my legacy here.
There's a couple of hoodies. There's a canvas tote bag, which is cool. There's a Majority Report travel mug. There's the baseball shirt. There's the zip hoodie, which is awesome. I don't know how your zip hoodie is actually cheaper than the pullover.
Well, because I don't know, those that charcoal one is pretty. I would like one of those.
The pullover.
The pullover, yeah.
Well, play cards right. Holidays are coming up. And there's we've got 3 different beanies, Majority Report beanies. We got a black one, a gray one, and a red one. We've got the I'm Losing It, Bro, and Pause It, Left is Best carpenter pencils. And of course, we got the normal Majority Report pack of 6 number 2 pencils. I don't know if people use pencils. I do. But there it is. So check it out, folks. You can go to shop.majorityreportradio.com, or if you're a member, log in on the site, click through the link. And if you, for whatever reason you can't do that, we're going to send you an email. If you're a member, we're going to send you an email with that special link so you can get your merch. So there you go. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. No, I forgot.
Yeah.
Just coffee.
Just coffee.
And you can look at the members post in the app too. You can log in on the app at majorityapp.com. You log in as a member, you can see it in that post as well. But justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, and of course, the fairest trade of all, the Majority Report blend at justcoffee.coop. Emma, ESVN.
Yeah, we are going to be breaking down a injury-riddled Week 11 in the NFL. Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson out for the season. But can the Browns prevail with maybe the best defense that we've seen in years? The Lions are still good. The Giants won, much to my dismay. And the Jets have completely collapsed. YouTube.com/ESPN. The Pats better do their job, to quote Bill Belichick next week. And when you're at the game, beat beat the Giants because
We'll have some fun.
They've got
I'll
a
see you
tank.
out the trail.
Saul and I are going to the Pats game on Sunday.
Go
Well,
Pats.
Some people say the Giants game, but it's really the Pats.
No,
game.
it is the Pats.
Is Saul just adopting the New England teams as his own? Is that working?
He doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, my dad tried to do that with me and like the Cowboys and the Cubs, and
Really?
eventually, like, I'm like a Vikings fan. And
Saul's not a huge like he's not like an intense sports fan.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I think he's going to just pick it up because that's all I'm going to take him. I mean,
Mila's maybe more intense based on what you've said about.
Mila is just intense. Period.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter like what it is. She could be at like a sporting event. She could be invested in the team or not invested in the team. She could be at like a a ballet, and she would be screaming down at like,
I like it.
Sweet plie.
She's passionate.
She's very passionate. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Tomorrow on Left Reckoning, we're talking to Nick Turse about drones. This weekend, did a Patreon episode talking about Jeremy Corbyn and Piers Morgan and some other stuff. And not Avi Shlaim, but Ilan Pappy talking about the new historians going into the archives in the 80s and then to the point where Israel decides that you can't actually reference the Nakba in 2011. So kind of the truncated history of our own sort of inability to record with our history as a settler colonial nation. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey Sam, hey Andy, you guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back. Major Burns, IMs us. The news is too demoralizing these days. Why can't y'all just talk about something cool like opossums or everything bagels? Just saying.
I'm a bigger fan of possums and bagels.
It says opossums.
That's how you spell it, but it's possum.
Is that really how you spell it?
Yeah.
They Irish?
Really?
For real? Yeah. Opossum, but it's possum.
But the O is silent?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever realized that there was not. I thought there was always two different spellings and that they were like homophones.
I did not know that.
It's kind of.
How did I?
It's in the baloney vein.
I remember that from like a book when I was before I could read. My mom like learning to read. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Opossum.
Well, I had that same experience with baloney being spelled Bologna.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that I can understand. I mean, there's like, weird silent stuff, but like at the begin, well, I guess K at the beginning of a word, but
People are saying they're two different animals, but I think that's ridiculous. I don't believe that at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of people weighing in on that now. I wish I hadn't said a word. This is from Friday. Anderson Cooper hosting Rami Igra, former head of Israeli intelligence. I mean, my sense is what's going on with these type of guests is that former military personnel, former intelligence personnel, former government officials are going out and they're basically saying the stuff that the Israeli government wants to say, but realizes that they can't really say anymore out loud because it becomes problematic from them from a public relations standpoint.
They may say it to local Israeli papers and not in English, but they send out these folks who are not still, currently affiliated with the Israeli government, but have the same positions to say that stuff in English on U.S.
Right. I mean,
outlets.
this is, I'm quite convinced this is like, one way in which the Israeli government is trying to sort of like create space for some of these horrific ideas.
If there's one thing we know about intelligence guys, it's that when they retire, they have nothing to do with the intelligence service.
Right, that never happens. But here is Anderson Cooper, and it is it's funny. Like, we're being very careful here not to injure civilians, but incidentally, we could.
Rami, what does fighting in the South look like to you? I mean, if there are hundreds of thousands, I mean, there's 50 people living in homes, people are just sleeping anywhere they can. What does that look like? How do you operate in that environment?
Well, the South is a big word, and in the South are several areas. We have been asking the Gazan to move to the Mawasi area, which is the area closest to the sea. And this is where the big 10 cities have been established. Fighting in the South in Han Yunis does not mean that we're fighting in the same area. And as you've seen in the last couple of weeks, the fighting is very surgical. It is slow. It is very methodical. We are trying not to reach any of the non-combatant population in the Gaza Strip. And
I just want to note, be like non-combatant population as opposed to the civilian population. The word is civilian population. Yeah. But they're being very careful. Now, of course, we know that Joe Biden a couple of days ago basically said, what they're doing at Al Shifa is not like the indiscriminate bombing they were doing before. So the idea that they've been surgical is really a joke. And again, displaced about 1.3 million people to go to the South, and now that
now not just the South, be in a specific part of the South.
Now
go to the tent city.
Move to this tent city.
Gaza
on
is
the coast,
25 miles long, and it ranges between 3.7 and 7.5 miles wide in terms of width. So when
it's
we're
like
talking
two Manhattans,
so you've gone to the South at this point, which they're also bombing. But you're not in the right part of the South at this point to avoid the Israeli bombardment, which is just like they want them all out of Gaza.
But, Matt's point of it in terms of width, that you're talking about two Manhattans. I mean, walking across town is not really a chore per se in terms of like a distance, for, massive bombing going on. The idea that you could be like on, First Avenue and they're just completely leveling, the West Side Highway is nuts. And the idea that you're going to basically take already when you had 2 point some odd 3 million people, the densest place on the planet, and now you're saying basically we want to put all those people into 1/4 of that same landmass. It's just absurd. But continue here.
Population in the Gaza Strip, and I think that there is no way that we can eradicate the Hamas without dealing with most of its forces that have fled to the south. Now, again, one little note: the non-combatant population in the Gaza Strip is really a non-existent term because all of the Gazans have voted for the Hamas. And as we have seen on the 7th of October, most of the population in the Gaza Strip are Hamas. Nonetheless, we are treating them as non-combatant. We are treating them as regular civilians, and they are spared from the fighting.
General Kimmett,
he just
what
moves
does he
on.
say? Does he
No,
just
he
move
moves
on?
on. I've seen the full clip. He just moves on.
I mean,
not one follow-up question on that front. So I'm not sure what is more egregious, the outright admission that they don't see any people in Gaza as non-combatants or as civilians, or the fact that Anderson Cooper, who is probably one of the highest paid anchors in the country, just moves on from a statement of explicit ethnic cleansing and then also admitted collective punishment, both war crimes, and just goes on to the next question. I mean, unfathomable.
This is Osama bin Laden's logic,
Exactly.
incidentally. But I will say this, that arguably, if you're just going to take it on the merits of this argument that Rami Igra is making, it is true that Osama bin Laden had the same sort of like calculus. But you have to say, if you're going to accept that calculus, the argument Osama bin Laden had made more sense, was sounder. Because A, Hamas won with a razor-thin majority. B, half the country was not even alive at that time, never mind voting age. So if you compare that, and I would say 3, that at the time of that election, there was not the sort of like, easy democracy that we have in this country. And we, subsequent to that election too, very hard to say that Palestinian citizens had the same sort of influence. Obviously, there was an election in the 16, 17 years since then, but very hard to say that Palestinians had the same sort of control over their government as we do here. I mean, just so if you're going to accept that that argument, the structure of that argument, you have to say that bin Laden had a stronger case based upon that. Now, I don't personally accept that argument, but Israel does.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And again, just to put a point on my criticism of Anderson Cooper here, just today it came out, I believe it was calculated by the Committee to Protect Journalists, that 48 journalists and media workers have been killed since October 7th. Obviously, those deaths are in Gaza, and I think maybe even in the West Bank. I'm not exactly sure. Again, fog of war, but at least 48 journalists and media workers killed. And the fact
hundreds of UN workers.
Yeah, the Israeli government is doing that on purpose so that they can come out and make these claims that Gaza just it deserves to be collectively punished because they support Hamas. And you have journalists sitting in their studios in the United States just taking that at face value and completely abdicating their duty here.
It is shocking to allow that to slide by.
Well, and I mean, what it is like our mainstream media can't decode this as anything other than a maybe brutal but anti-terror effort, and it's not an anti-terror effort. It's an anti-Gaza, anti-Palestinian effort disguised as an anti-terror effort that uses terror, including targeting journalists, as part of that tactic.
And it's amazing to me that the political education about Israel's tactics on that front seems to be starting on October 7th for our most prominent reporters in this country. I mean, we've been covering this for since I've started here, and even before when I was at TYT, like, I had an understanding that Israel uses these kinds of tactics a lot. Shireen Abu Akleh, that happened 2 years ago or last year. I mean, come on, let's get an understanding and not just say, oh, whoopsie. Obviously, the Israeli government means to do the right thing. It's clearly not the intention.
Yeah.
Let's wise up here.
We need to mature a little bit in our mainstream media.
And just because he speaks English and because he has lighter skin than some of the Palestinians doesn't necessarily mean that what he says is truthful, Anderson Cooper.
I also think that there is probably a lot of corporate pressure to discourage any type of questioning that would lay bare what that guy is saying.
Yeah, keep media off the show.
Exactly.
All those kind of guys.
I mean, I think to MSNBC's credit, I think once there was that pushback about them pulling
Velshi,
Velshi and Mehdi Hassan and Ayman Molinari off the airways, or at least sort of quasi benching them, as it were. Once there was that pushback, I think they basically said, okay, we can't get away with this.
Yeah, good job, Semaphore, uncovering that. And also good job, Joy Reid, who stands with her Muslim colleagues and has been doing good work. And she has a nightly show, right?
Yeah.
So that's also, I think, added credit to her on that front.
Not that this should be the primary reason why Biden changes direction, but anything that can encourage the Biden administration to change. And we should say, while we're saying this stuff about supposedly there's no non-combatants, according to Israel, in Gaza, we should also say that their behavior also suggests they don't believe that that's the case on the West Bank, too, even though Hamas is not there. There's been over 100 killings of Palestinians in the West Bank since October 7th.
And we should say the West Bank has been demilitarized since the 90s. So the people that have the guns are the Israelis. Palestinians are not armed, and they're not able to defend themselves from some of the settler violence sanctioned and encouraged by the IDF.
Bernie Sanders came out and said, we need to talk about conditioning Israeli funding based upon what's happening in West Bank. This is not a new position for him. He's been saying that for
2020 at least.
I think it's even going back as 2018. But it's almost like a proxy. It's sort of a bizarre proxy, it seems to me. Like we're gonna avoid what's going on over here, and we're not going to say anything about the murder that's taking place over here, but we are going to say you got a traffic violation. We got to look into that.
Yeah,
Katie Porter, when she went on that trip with AIPAC and Hakeem Jeffries and got a little bit of blowback, a month later she's in the news saying, "Oh yeah, I'm really worried about these settlers. What these settlers are doing." It's like, sure you are.
Yeah, I mean, but putting conditions on this aid package is putting lipstick on a $14 billion pig, and that pig is about to kill a child every 10 minutes.
Biden's approval rating is at one of its lowest, and it appears that a big thing that is driving his disapproval numbers right now is down 8 points from September. 33% of all voters approve of Biden's handling foreign policy. 30% of Democrats also, and it's mostly people under the age of 35. It is really, really dragging him down. And there was an attack right before we went on air. Hezbollah struck a military base in northern Israel. I don't know if we have too much more information on that, but the idea of this becoming a regional conflict increases, obviously, for the longer that Israel is engaged with Hamas and killing Palestinians. It's, I don't know at what point the Biden administration says we stopped putting good money after bad, as it were. But right now, this, it's like and not just on a moral ground, obviously, but on in terms of like
political self-preservation.
Exactly.
Yeah, he made an assessment that this wouldn't hurt him politically, and I
Did you
think
see
that
Nate
that's
Silver?
very outdated. This kind of young people living through this is the kind of thing that's going to change their worldview for the rest of their lives. Witnessing what's happening in Gaza. Go on.
Nate Silver tweeted out yesterday, or not yesterday, but earlier on in the conflict, that young people were likely to be supportive of Joe Biden's support for Israel. And it's like, what made you think that would happen?
That is stunning. Like, I can understand.
Yeah.
I can understand based upon like, if you're 65 or older, saying people don't really care about foreign policy.
He quote tweeted Waleed Shahid on October 19th saying, "The polling is a very long ways from perfect, but it's still better than relying on your peer group. Biden's stance is likely to be popular, including with young voters. It's actually exceptionally unpopular with young voters, but also unpopular with everyone."
Your peer
It's
group
unpopular with
sounds like
everyone,
a
but
dog whistle.
particularly, yes. I mean, I don't know how Nate Silver is on very specific numbers in, let's say, baseball, rotisserie league, but once he gets out of that realm, it is really nuts.
Yeah. Waleed Shahid, in terms of
that was October 19th. Now, I guess to be fair, if you were a completely oblivious, you might think that this would be have been over by now, a month later.
Maybe check your models on that one too.
Young people grew up in the Iraq War era, and this is a continuation of like collective understanding from that age group, 18 to 34, about foreign policy and what our government really does.
It really is. What's really sort of like beautiful about this Nate Silver tweet? Have you put it up on the screen? Yeah, we did. Let's put it up again, because this is almost like a piece of art. Honestly, Waleed Shahid says back in October 18th. In terms of young voters turning sour, Gaza could do to President Biden what Vietnam did to LBJ. So he is saying, looking into the future, we don't know what's going to happen in Gaza, but it definitely has the potential to do to President Biden what Vietnam did to LBJ. So he's not making a current assessment. Yeah. And Nate Silver, in just a like, the hubris, the confidence couldn't be more inverse than the competency in this moment. The polling is a very long ways away from perfect. In other words, he's now being just incredibly condescending. Yeah. Polling's not perfect, Waleed, but it's still better than relying on your peer group, Waleed.
Yeah.
Of all your people who might be sympathetic to Palestinians, Waleed.
Which Nate Silver would never do. He's not influenced whatsoever by his peer group of cocktail New York Times folks. He's just looking at things objectively.
In what possible universe could you have said at that time, or really any time? First of all, that like, when has foreign policy been popular with young people, short of like making some, bringing about like some type of like detente, or, I imagine like, Obama's, to the extent that people knew about the Iran deal, was somewhat popular. But when has the waging of a war ever been popular, if people paid attention to it, which is very often the case, they don't, been popular with young voters? Like, where was even the slightest data point to make this? I think you're right. It was just around Nate Silver's friend group.
Yeah, can you click on Waleed's tweet actually? Because I'm curious. Is it that polling about Arab voters in Michigan? That's what I'm assuming. the quote tweet. Yeah. What? Oh wait, no. He's just assessing
he's
it
just
based
making
on
an assessment.
Yeah,
of,
he's
like,
so
saying that
but there
there's a
has been polling to
potential
back
for
it
that.
up. By
Well,
the
yeah,
way.
but that was a month ago.
Exactly. So I mean, even then, it's the idea that Nate goes out of his way to make this case. Yeah. No. So Wally was just making his like a political assessment, and Nate Silver goes out of his way. Yeah, Israel is not popular among young people. It's definitely not popular among young people of color. It's also not popular
For
among
an
young
intervention.
Jews.
Like I'm thinking, like the last time I remember young people, like I'm thinking back to like Rick Perlstein talking about early Vietnam, and like some young people supported that. But like since then, I think that turned. I think it was probably the last time young people were like belligerent,
Right, and that's coming out of the 50s,
right?
And McCarthyism, and the idea that there was a rump amount of young people who were still sort of like in this sort of full-on Cold War mentality, not surprising. But this is not 1975. Where we're not people aren't coming out of the theaters watching Paul Newman in Exodus and going like, I still have let's go for these Sabras.
Yeah.
That's not what's going on here. And really, you have to be a complete moron not to have been aware of that. I mean, the idea that like, yes, there's no doubt that, maybe around my Thanksgiving table, there might be some people who are, sort of have that perspective. But the idea that you call yourself like a professional political commentator and make that is just shocking.
Also, like using the authority that like looking at aggregated polls has won you. Like the thing he says,
and then
there,
not to base your comment on any type of polling,
but to allude to it, say like the polling isn't perfect, which is a admission that like we don't have a good indicator on that, which is the only place that his insight comes from. And then just to say like, but if the polling was better, it probably would agree with me.
Yeah, that's the extra like dripping condescension there, is that he's editorializing, but he does this constantly and pretends.
I've seen a lot of polls.
Pretends that it's not based in polling. Yeah, I mean, if you want to editorialize Nate, maybe just like have a better grasp of actual politics, because people that have engaged with this topic for years at this point, not just starting on October 7th, know that Israel has been slowly losing the information war on social media, which young people consume. So it's not the TikTok algorithm and the Chinese communists coming to brainwash your kids. It's a broad understanding and education that's been happening over a long period of time, accelerated by Israel's crimes of genocide in Gaza.
And also, all you need to do is look back, during the Obama years. I mean, Tim Kaine did not show up for a Netanyahu address to Congress, and frankly, a bunch of other U.S. senators. I mean, this is not a new phenomenon. The trend was going in a certain way, and but all right, be that as it may, let's move on to something different. I'm going to turn off the voicemail. We'll take some phone calls, although we're already behind. We went late. This is an important message from. This came via. Where was the tweet? Who was the tweet from that we for number 5?
I didn't have the tweet. I have the TikTok video.
I sent the tweet.
Okay.
I can't remember which organization it was that was highlighting this. Yeah. Okay. More Perfect Union put out this this tweet from a TikToker, Tyler Lima Roop, I think is his name. He and I was not aware. I mean, I know this from in terms of Medicaid, and I presume he's talking about some type of Medicaid provision, or it could be. I'm not exactly sure if this is a Social Security insurance or Medicaid.
It is,
but
SSI.
SSI. Yeah. I certainly am aware of this in terms of Medicaid. In terms of what I've dealt with my my parents, but was not aware that this was the case for SSI. Maybe we had talked about this when we had Matthew Cortland on. I guess maybe now that was 2 years ago. But this is really extraordinary. There is a $2,000 cap on assets that you can have, or that you must have, to be eligible for Social Security disability insurance. And it's absurd. It's absurd.
Meaning you can't even be a homeowner? Basically, at all?
I don't know if your home actually constitutes an asset, but and I'm not sure about a vehicle, but that's it. That's it. Here is, and there is an opportunity to raise that cap.
There is a decision being made right now that will drastically change my life forever, and I need your help. So currently the way it works is that if you're disabled in the United States, you can't have more than $2,000 at any given time. If I literally have 1 penny above $2,000, all of my benefits are at risk. They literally don't let me build for the future. I can't have an emergency fund. The term get rich or die trying, looking pretty bleak these days. And right now the government is in the process of changing that cap from 2,000 to 10,000. And this would help me and countless other people so much. Not only that, but I'm married now. And when you're married with a disability, there's this thing called a marriage penalty, which limits your income even further. That $2,000 limit that I was talking about earlier now counts for both of us. A lot of people assume that marriage equality exists everywhere for everyone in the United States, and it does not for disabled people. And this bill would change that too. So please, please share this video wherever you can to everyone you know. Go to the link in my bio. There's a petition there that's super easy to fill out. And once you fill out, it will be sent to your local congressperson automatically. Very few times is there such a direct way that you can make a difference. This is one of them. Please go to the link. This is very exciting for me, and I know it is for so many other people. Thank you so much.
All right, I misspoke. It's not SSDI. It is SSI, which is a Supplemental Security Income Program. This is something that is different from SSDI. SSDI does not have these asset limits, but SSI, Supplemental Security Income, which is for low-income elderly and for disabled people, has a strict limit. $2,000 for an individual. My understanding is $3,000 for a couple. I guess we got that up here.
This is the petition right here.
And this is the petition. We're going to put a link to that.
It's crazy that the couple limitation is half. There's many things insane about this, but why, under the current asset limits, are you essentially penalized for getting married? Because it's it would make sense for it to be 4,000 instead of 3,000. But regardless, we can't get a wealth tax in this country. We can't say billionaires don't exist and put a limit on their wealth. But you can only have $2,000 maximum if you want to get disability insurance under SSI.
Accountable resources include cash, bank accounts, retirement savings, stocks, mutual funds, savings bonds, life insurance, household goods, burial funds, and as well as the resources of parents, spouses, and immigration sponsors in many cases. Your primary residence and vehicle, like I say, do not count against the resource limits. It's nuts.
It's absolutely
Billy,
insane.
this is huge. I'm on disability, and yeah, I'm stuck. I can't build my way out of this at all. It's the worst feeling on earth. Dave from Ohio says you cannot own a home. You have to liquidate your assets now. That's for Medicaid. That's for Medicaid, but under SSI, that is not the case.
This is what means testing looks like in practice, by the way. And that's why, we always attempt to make programs universal, because when you create these carve-outs, it's a way to bleed these programs dry and not have them actually help people in any real way. Disabled people should be able to make as much and keep as much and save as much and buy whatever they want and not lose their health care.
Knott says, from experience, jewelry, cars, home furniture, plus you can't make more than $200 a month and extra income. Like I say, primary vehicle and residence are not counted towards this. Dragon of Chaos. Generalissimo Seder. What is the operational state of the war on Christmas? Oh, tobacco accurate. Exodus, the movie was 1960, not 1975. Fair. Sorry. I'm thinking of raid on Entebbe, which is the first time I ever heard the word Netanyahu.
So Exodus was the year after Ben-Hur, huh? So I guess there was a bit of an appetite for those kind of films.
The $2,000 cap, incidentally, was set in 1972.
Wow.
Just give you
what was that? Yeah. And
I know you can Google that and find out how many, what that was in dollars. Calling from a 954 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Oh, wait.
Hello?
Hello? Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry, just a second.
Can you hear me?
He said,
yeah, I can hear you. There we go. Sorry, I stepped out of the office. You guys can hear me okay?
Yeah, who's this?
My name is Francisco. I'm calling from Buenos Aires in Argentina.
What happened?
You guys can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I was just asking about the election results. Not good.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm calling about, I guess. I tried to call last week to talk a little bit about it. I'm, of course, as you can imagine, incredibly disappointed, pissed off. I don't know. There's a lot of things to say about it, but I don't know. I guess I wanted to, for one, if that's okay, I wanted to give some, I don't know, context or my view at least as someone who lives here.
Please.
And has his whole life. And yeah, sorry, I'm a little nervous, but
you're doing great.
So yeah, basically part of the frustration that I have with this, by the way, I was really happy to see you guys cover our election beforehand. I know Emma interviewed someone about it, but I think something that when you talk to journalists or really anyone in this country, sometimes they neglect to mention some of the problems with, the coalitions in this country. And I believe, I'm incredibly ashamed that someone like Milei can win an election here. But I think it's irresponsible to not say that part of the reason he won, as unfortunate as it is that the opposing coalition that, was running against him, has governed this country for 16 years in the past. And, it was 12 years in a row. Then there was a stop in the middle where things got even worse with Mauricio Macri's government. And then they came back and, here we are. And there's an issue, where, because, look, I disagree on an essential level, especially on my views. I'm a leftist. I voted for the left party here. But I know why some people voted for Milei, and as much as I disagree with them, a lot of people don't care about anything other than looking for stability in the economy. And that's the worst part about it, is that, people stop caring about social issues when that's going on. Like, I'm 28 years old, and in my whole life, I don't think I've lived a single moment of, economical stability, and I'm not poor. I'm moderately well off. I can't even imagine for, the 40% poor people we have now. And a lot of them even voted for Milei. And right now, I don't know, I feel like as a country, we're kind of the butt of the joke, and rightfully so. I mean, I understand why people find it ridiculous that someone like this would win. But I feel like, I don't know, I feel like part of the context here is that, people are just tired. Like, recent pollings in October said that a lot of people here in Argentina were actually willing to have an authoritarian regime if it would fix, the economical problems of the country, they would welcome an authoritarian regime, and that's the sort of thing that is, well, incredibly depressing, but I don't know, I think it's part of the context that maybe some people abroad would miss. And also the fact that, unfortunately, the opposition to Milei is, unfortunately, very, very corrupt, too, which is something that is not often mentioned maybe as much. A lot of sketchy people involved in that party. And, it's very frustrating to have the center left in this country, which is, that have all the power and to not actually get, more left-leaning politicians to actually get to do anything here. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying, or maybe it sounds as me being apologetic.
I'll tell you something.
Voted
It's not terribly unfamiliar from where we were in 2016, or we may be in in 2024. I mean, obviously different dynamics, but there's when people are feeling particularly when there's and I think the economic instability is far greater, obviously, in your country, but it also may be relative on some level, right? Like, there may be a sort of a broad, like a wider tolerance for it on some level. I mean, honestly, just by experience, right? Like, I mean, 140% inflation, if you've been at 130% inflation, it doesn't seem, I don't know.
Exactly.
But nevertheless, similar dynamic. It sounds like people were just sort of sick of, they wanted to break things because nothing else has been working.
Yeah, especially, like, for example, this is just anecdotal, but the other day I was in the supermarket and I was speaking with the cashier, and she was telling me how every day of the week they have to change the price tags of things, sometimes twice or even 3 times a day, and that it's driving them nuts. So under that context, here comes someone that is not part of really our political environment, someone new, fresh supposedly, and comes in and says he's going to break everything. And I guess at this point, people just want that, and look, I'm not proud either of having voted for Massa, really, because, I think as much as he was a lesser evil, at least in my view, there's the unfortunate reality that, his coalition, like I said, were in power for 16 years, 12 in a row. And, things have done nothing but get worse and worse and worse. So I do understand why some people that even I know have, but as much as it frustrates me, I understand why they voted for, such a lunatic. I'm not willing to compromise our social, stability for that. But I do know why some people, maybe are not as socially conscientious. They just go about their lives and they don't think about that sort of thing as much. And I'm really concerned about, especially the long-term ramifications of someone who has said the things he has to be able to win an election. I don't know. I can only hope that from this term, maybe we finally get a proper, left party, empowered left-wing party in this country. But, I'm honestly, I don't hold much hope at this point.
Yeah, caller, Massa,
I don't know,
and the Peronists. Is it how do you understand that? Is like a centrist authoritarianism?
Yeah,
is that how to understand that?
Actually, so that's the funny thing, right? I feel like I have a rather unique view on this, at least as a leftist. Then maybe I know a lot of leftists would have my head over this topic. But if you ask me personally, I mean, I don't know how much you guys know about our history, but Perón was a fascist. Like, he was friends with, Mussolini and a lot of other. He also was a Nazi sympathizer. His government was the one that, unfortunately, the main thing we get made fun of abroad in this country for receiving Nazis and giving them new identities, and that was under Perón's government. But somehow, Perón was able to, kind of become the main figure for the more left-leaning, politics in this country. I think part of it was, and, I'm not probably the best person to ask, maybe someone with a lot more information would be, but he did, take land from a lot of, rich people and a lot of that. So he got a lot of, reverence from all of the poor people in the country. And I mean, they did do some things for the poor people in the country, but it doesn't change the fact that when you look at him as a whole, he was a fascist, he was a friend of fascists, he was also, a Nazi sympathizer. And unfortunately, that's something that, Peronists are willing to ignore. If you ask them about it, at worst, they will tell you that it's something they shameful about it, but overall, it's not what Peronism represents, which to me is ridiculous because the coalition has his name. And unfortunately, that's part of the reason why the left can't gain any, momentum in this country, because leftism is associated with this person. And at least in my view, where lots of people in this country and even in left-wing, environments, a lot of people, if I were to dare speak against Perón, would, they would want to kill me. Like it's comparable to Trump almost, It's almost, I would define it as a cult. I mean, back then when he was still in government, people were giving little books that said about how Perón was taking care of the poor people and how him and his wife, Evita, were like almost like the Virgin Mary and God, So it was almost, if you ask me, almost a sort of brainwashing campaign. I mean, it's right down of the fascist notebook, But since he did do some, more left-leaning things in the country, he somehow became this important figure of the left, and unfortunately, that's where we're at. And yeah, I mean, it's been over like 70 years, and he's still like politicians from all parties, center left, center right, far right, far left. They all know themselves as Peronists. It's very hard to run as one that you aren't. But it's a very divisive topic because the problem is that most anti-Peronists are much more, right to far-right people. So that's part of the problem, right? If you ever dare be against that, then you're automatically tagged to be more on the right. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated topic, and I mean, I'm just a regular office worker, so...
We're going to have a guest on tomorrow to talk about that, but we really do appreciate your perspective.
Thank you for
Thanks
calling
for calling.
in.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for taking my call, and thank you guys for, covering all of this. I think you've done a great job, and I appreciate that you also took some time to cover my country situation. Usually we don't get as much attention as other.
Well, like
Latin
I say,
American
we got a
countries,
guest on. We got a guest on tomorrow to talk about it too. So we'll appreciate
awesome.
it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to that. So thank you guys. You have a great day and left it best.
Okay. Thank you.
Too.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Val Shells. Binder had a debate with someone a few months ago who was mad he brought up South America had Nazis. Are we allowed to talk about that yet?
I didn't think we were ever disallowed from talking about
What
it.
was the summary of that? That Binder was mad?
Binder had a debate with someone who was mad about the talk about Nazis in South America.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm not really sure if that's...
Left or Beret, I appreciate the caller from Argentina, the context he gave. I think there's a slippery slope between making fun of the goofy guy who won an election and demeaning Argentinian people. I feel like as Americans, we can really sympathize with the embarrassment of a fool being in office while also understanding why populist talking points work to sway people. Yes, I also do think that we should be made fun of to a certain extent too.
Yeah, make fun of politicians. What?
Oh, no, he's saying, Argentinians, not so much the politician.
Yeah, I mean, Argentinians, of course, minus all those people that were exiled and killed. Yeah, it helps shape a demographic when you're allowed to do an Operation Condor.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I think making fun of Americans is like more punching up, I think, to most people in the world than us making fun of others.
Yeah.
This is fun. Look, there's a fourth debate coming up, right? When is that coming up? Early December.
Oh, God help us.
And the upshot is it'll be the last time that we will have to see Chris Christie. After that, you'll make the active choice to either watch Morning Joe or not. And then you'll see him there, presumably, or wherever else he's going to be. But it is, we made this point the other day that there's no daylight between Donald Trump. I think it was with Digby on Friday. There's no daylight between Donald Trump and the Republican Party. I mean, to the extent that there is, it's really just Donald Trump doesn't believe half of it, anyways. It's just, but the Republican Party does,
and that's what
and
matters.
even the so-called moderates. Remember, Chris Christie was a Donald Trump, a card-carrying Donald Trumpista until Trump basically said, after you get my sandwich at McDonald's, don't come back.
He was the first to drop out to endorse Trump and stood behind him in that embarrassing display.
Of course. But here he is on Meet the Press. Why Chris Christie's on Meet the Press? It's a good question. But that's why he's running for office, so that he can get onto these Sunday talk shows. And here he is.
Governor, let me ask you about one of the biggest policy positions for Republicans right now, which is the issue of abortion. Your rival, Governor Ron DeSantis, signed a 6-week ban in Florida. As you know, Donald Trump said that was a, quote, terrible mistake. And just this weekend, Nikki Haley said on Friday she would have signed a 6-week ban as the governor of South Carolina. Where are you on this issue of a 6-week ban, Governor? Can you be clear for voters?
Yeah, I sure can be. I think each state should make their own decision, Kristen. And I think that's what Dobbs was all about, was letting each state and its people make their own decision. And we've seen referenda go on in places like Kansas and Ohio and other places where voters are getting to express their view on this. I think that's the way it should have always been. This is not a federal constitutional issue. This is a state issue, Kristen. And each state should make their own judgment on this. And I think the president or people running for president should not be in a position of picking a certain number of weeks.
Governor RNC Chairwoman Ron McDaniel told me last week on this show, quote, we can't just say it's a state's issue and be done. Voters want clarity. So can you give them some? Where do you stand on a 6-week ban, Governor? Would you sign it, for example, if it had come to your desk in New Jersey?
With my Democratic legislature in New Jersey, no ban would have come to my desk, Kristen. So it's a ridiculous question, with all due respect.
Governor,
no, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals, Kristen. I'm simply not.
Do you support a 6-week ban? How do you feel about a 6-week ban? You, Governor Christie.
I have said my position on this, which is that every state and its people should make its own judgment on this issue. I have governed as a pro-life governor in New Jersey, and I believe in the sanctity of human life. But I'm not going to get into this media game of 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 15 weeks, 20 weeks. I want the American...
I'm not going to get into this media game until I get hired in 6 weeks to be your colleague, Kristen Welker. But I love the idea that he's not going to get into hypotheticals. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals, which is literally just a question about what your belief systems are. Like, in theory, it's all hypothetical. You're not going to be president. I mean, but when you're running for president, it's in theory hypothetical that, like, a bill comes to your desk. You're supposed to be honest with the public about what your position is on that front.
The real question is, would you sign a 6-week ban that came to your desk? Like, that is not some type of fantastical, how would you react if aliens came flying down? No, the idea of a Republican Senate and House passing a 6-week ban is completely, almost absurdly within the bounds of a certainly a possibility. But I would say if there is a majority, Republican and House and Senate, it's unlikely they will not attempt to pass a ban on abortions that would be, maybe it would be 12, maybe it would be 6, but it ain't going to be 18. And it's definitely going to be a federal ban. I mean, They don't have the ability to put the brakes on this. They have a Christian nationalist. They voted for their Speaker of the House. This is not like some far-fetched hypothetical. This is a guy who's like, who believes that we should be operating under God's law. You're going to be president of the United States. You got to have a perspective on what's going to come across your desk. And the idea that he gets like, so, I mean, what, maybe he's
indignant.
Maybe the only thing he's thinking is like, I don't know if I can get hired on regular cable. I may have to go to WorldNet Daily or something like that. And I don't want to, shut that door.
J.D. Vance on November 8th had this quote after the Ohio population reaffirmed the right to an abortion in the Constitution. The quote was, "We can't give in to the idea that the federal Congress has no role in this matter," specifically referring to a 15-week ban with exceptions. 15 weeks is also what was introduced by Lindsey Graham, also a federal senator. So you have a theocrat who leads the Republicans in the House. You have a map that's not favorable to the Democrats in 2024 in the Senate, and the real possibility that the Republican becomes the president. So let's not say this is a hypothetical. This is a very obvious reality that could shake out. It's just funny to me because he's too afraid to say anything. And Ronna McDaniel doesn't even say anything in that quote that Welker gives because the Republicans do not want to deal with this because they think that is going to be what does them in 24, if anything.
So, Speaker Mike Johnson, the Christian theocrat who is the Speaker of the House elected by Republicans, I guess he released all the January 6th footage. Was it all of it, or is he like dribbing and drabbing it out? But the big thing going around in the fever swamp is that Mike Pence talks like a robot, and apparently in giving the report to Nancy Pelosi on two different occasions, once when Chuck Grassley was there and once when he wasn't, Mike Pence spoke in using the exact same language in terms of repeating it. And there's this notion that somehow it was a recording. I guess the theory goes that when Nancy Pelosi was on the speakerphone with different people on video, that they had played a recording of Mike Pence and just played it twice. It really is impossible to understand what the theory is behind this, but it should come no surprise that they're creating all sorts of theories to pretend like January 6th didn't happen. Here is, this is clip number 7, the House Homeland Security Committee hearing. Representative Clay Higgins, I think we've talked about him before, Republican from Louisiana, is interviewing FBI director, we should say a Republican appointed FBI director, Chris Wray, about January 6th. And this guy thinks that he's I don't know, he's cracked the code on, the Bourne identity or something. Here it is.
Congressman, as we've discussed before, I'm not going to get into where we have or have not used confidential human sources. But what I can tell you, you asked for a definitive
We'll move
answer.
on. It's my time. You said no, you're not going to answer. That's cool. We're watching.
Mr. Chairman, may I answer the question?
The moment will come. This is my time. Earlier this year, an FBI informant who is reported to have, his quote, under oath, marched to the U.S. Capitol with fellow Proud Boys members on January 6th, close quote. He said he was communicating with his FBI handler while people were entering the U.S. Capitol. Can you confirm that the FBI had that sort of engagement with your own agents embedded into the crowd on January 6th?
If you are asking whether the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources and or agents, the answer is emphatically
You're saying
not.
no?
No.
You're saying no?
Not
Okay.
violence orchestrated by FBI sources or agents.
Are you familiar with...
Now, pause it for a second. Now, I think what's not being stated here is that it's more than likely there were FBI agents in that crowd monitoring it because there was a lot of intelligence saying this could be a problem.
Yeah.
You recall also, like, there were a couple of FBI agents, one of whom had to almost fight off the president who was trying to grab the steering wheel, drive me to the
Secret Service agents.
Secret Service agent.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I mean, and we know that there was a lot of chatter, like intel. The FBI was aware that something could go down.
Because everyone who had social media could
Well,
see
not
it.
just social media, but apparently, they were aware that, maybe the Oath Keepers or whatnot were, amassing weapons on the outskirts of town.
I mean, Trump said stand back and stand by, and that probably gave Chris Wray and the FBI a heads up to be like, maybe let's monitor if the Proud Boys are going to stand back and stand by with intent to commit violence.
Now, we should say that I would be hard-pressed to talk about any major protest that doesn't involve, that doesn't have undercover cops or, undercover feds. There's no doubt in my mind that up at,
During the George
in
Floyd
Brooklyn,
protests?
well, never mind the George Floyd
The
protest.
Palestine protests.
The Palestine protests, that there aren't undercover feds or, New York City police intel people. The idea Occupy, this happens all the time.
I have news for
But they don't
Higgins.
necessarily start the assault on the Capitol, and that's what Higgins is trying to say here. But
he of course didn't care when it was clear that there was a certain provocation of Muslim people in the wake of 9/11 at mosques, which were under heavy FBI surveillance.
Of course, and here is Higgins though. The problem is that Higgins is too insane to stop at the notion of did you have people, federal officials, federal agents or local agents posing as protesters at that moment? That's where if he could stop there, he could at least create the innuendo.
Mm-hmm.
But he's off his rocker and thinks that there was actually not just, listen to this.
Traded by FBI sources or agents.
Are you familiar with you know what a ghost vehicle is? Director of the FBI certainly should. You know what a ghost bus is?
A ghost bus?
Ghost bus.
I'm not sure I've used that term before.
Okay.
Ghostbusters.
Nutcracker Magical Christmas Ballet returns to Brooklyn. The Christmas tradition your family
The ad. Well,
Okay, here we go.
In law enforcement, it's a vehicle that's used for secret purposes. It's painted over. These two buses in the middle here, they were the first to arrive at Union Station on January 6th, 0500. I have all this evidence. I'm showing you a tip of this iceberg.
Mr. Chairman.
These two buses are
Mr.
painted
Chairman.
completely white.
Point of order.
Point of order. Sure.
Just run over the time.
I understand, but you'll recall that Ms. Jackson Lee's been allowed to go 2 minutes before. I've been very fair in letting people finish their questioning throughout my tenure as chairman, and I'll continue to be fair on that regard. But I will make a note to the members, if you could stay as close within your time as possible. We have a lot of people that want to ask these gentlemen questions. So with that, the gentleman yields. But your point, I've been very fair in this, Mr. Ivey, with everybody on this side of the aisle just as much.
I don't think I accuse you of being unfair, Mr. Chairman.
You're making a point. Okay, thank you. I now recognize Mr.
May I
Gray.
close this statement, Mr.
No,
Chairman?
I think your time is expired, Mr.
I note that other members across the aisle have been granted time, and I object to my question being closed. This is a very significant hearing, Mr. Chairman, and these buses are nefarious in nature, filled with FBI informants dressed as Trump supporters, and deployed onto our Capitol on January 6th. Your day is coming, Mr. Ray.
Mr. Higgins.
There you go. You got the chairman going oh God, he's such a nut job. Just think about this for a moment. First off, apparently there's no FBI agents in DC. So they got to bust them in. And of course, the FBI, under the rule of sneaking in secret Trump supporters, they're not allowed to show a logo of a bus.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI can't rent a bus that has a logo on it if you're going to do this, you've got to paint them all white because, of course,
The FBI has an endorsement deal with Greyhound, and you just can't have like the competitors showing up. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so insane.
Yeah.
The idea that like the FBI is shuttling in secret protesters to stage a riot, and they're only allowed to do it in unmarked buses.
It's quite funny. And also for people paying attention at home, you know, that chair of the committee there is Mark Green, I believe. And that's a Republican. He's trying to save
Oh, definitely.
Chip, what's his last
Clay
Higgins.
Higgins
Clay Higgins from himself and the Republican Party from, like, to your point, Sam, they could have just stayed at the innuendo and that would have given, you know, a lot of catnip for the crazies, but he went down the ghost buses thing.
Well, you know, those ghost buses are
Trojan ghost
nefarious.
buses. Yeah.
Nefarious ghost buses.
Actually,
Nefarious in
I will say
nature.
this.
I kept thinking
Mr. Chairman?
Ghostbusters. Yeah.
Here's the point is that before they paint those buses all white, you know what the brand of that bus line was? Nefarious bus line.
Oh.
And so that's why they had to paint it white.
And what color are ghosts?
Yeah.
Look, white.
If you're going to infiltrate a MAGA protest, at least you can't be, you know, carpooling and getting a bus. Everyone has to get there on their own, pay for their own transportation.
But it just blends right in because it is a all white bus.
Nefarious ghost bus.
Yes,
It's
so
like
there
that. It's like that Hey Arnold episode about the ghost train.
Deep cut.
Here is Donald Trump was in Iowa this weekend, and he was introduced by Iowa State Rep Bobby Kaufman. And this is
Bobby.
Yeah, do you know that guy? He's
But we're
trying to
back
make
on
it,
this
He's trying to make
again.
Yep.
Okay.
He's trying to make a name for himself. And here is Iowa State Rep Bobby Kaufman bringing out the hits.
And
as
this
it
was
were.
from over the weekend and not from 2016.
Exactly.
Okay.
They're bringing back the hits. Reprise.
If we could only return to the way things were, $1.89 gas, respect abroad, things were calm, things were peaceful. Things also had common sense. Do you remember that? Little things like we say Merry Christmas, not Happy Holidays.
That's new.
We stand for the anthem, right? Because what does it mean when you kneel for the anthem? Kneeling for the anthem does not make you brave. It makes you a disrespectful little shit.
Pause it. Freeze it right there. Look at that audience. That is not like Trump is not exactly drawing the 18 to 35 crowd there.
Yeah, but I mean, that dude played the hits. He knew. That's the thing is like when you go to a concert for maybe some sort of aging kind of rock star, Trump's in that category, I would say, for the right. You don't want to hear their new album. I saw Elton John live with my mom. She was like, "Why did he play that new stuff? I just wanted to hear Benny and the Jets."
Exactly.
And that's exactly what's happening
Exactly
here.
what's going on.
I will
here.
say Bobby Kaufman here has quite an interesting Wikipedia page for a 37 to 38-year-old Iowa politician. Arrests, a political career. So he ran for office 2012. Arrests, he was basically he's in the position that his father held, the 73rd district seat previously held by his father.
His dad is the chair of the Iowa.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. He also
What was he arrested for?
A guilty plea for public intoxication that became a campaign issue. He deferred judgment, and the charges were removed after probation. There's also a later revelation that he had at least 17 citations and arrests, mostly for traffic-related issues. He also had a thing where he was
but he stands for the anthem.
Yeah, was he disrespectful in those instances?
He wanted to use his position as chair of the Iowa House Government Oversight Committee to launch an investigation into LGBT youth conference. That also surfaced allegations that he himself is homosexual. He had a relationship. In a reaction, Kaufman testified before the Iowa State Government Oversight Committee that he was not in a homosexual relationship with colleague Greg Hartstill, saying, "I am here to announce that Representative Hartstill and I are not in a homosexual relationship." So there's that. Interesting guy for a guy who's 3 years older than I am.
All right, well, let's let him finish it out.
And finally, the ultimate return to common sense. It's ridiculous I even have to say this, but I will. There are two genders. There's male and female. You get two choices. It's sir or man, period.
All right, now you got to hand it to him. He is at least acknowledging that gender is a choice. You get two choices, and that's it. So he does not. He's not a big fan of like the Jays or the whatever it is, but at least he's progressive enough to realize like gender is a social construct. You get two choices.
Yeah,
that's it.
In 2016, he passed a Suck It Up Buttercup bill that would cut the budget of state universities by double the amount they spend on such activities regarding like mental health research, stuff like that. Also says in a interview with Fox and Friends on November 16th, Kaufman claimed there was post-election cry rooms and that he was hearing, this is at universities, and that he was hearing reports of some schools that were bringing in ponies to be able to get students through the election. These claims were untrue. When pressed for more details.
What about the kitty litter?
Yeah, exactly.
People identifying as cats.
When pressed for more details on these reports of coddling students during a live interview later that day with the Canadian radio show As It Happens, Kaufman hung up and accused the program of having an agenda.
Oh my God. There he is. I'm sure we'll see more of him.
Big asshole from Iowa. That's people who stay in Iowa. As somebody who knows a lot of people who have left that state because of the brain drain, basically, it sucks.
Or if your dad is high up in the Republican leadership and can fast track you to be a wonderkind.
Yeah, Jeff Kaufman is his father. He's the Iowa chair of the Iowa GOP. And so he's like Florida. He's like Iowa Gates, basically.
Yeah. Also someone who, has had some trouble with the law.
Should we just finish on this clip number 13? I haven't seen this one. It's really, it'll be a nice way to sort of round out the show.
Understood.
Very peaceful. I mean,
open your third eye, everybody. It's about to get real metaphysical around
When
here.
I think of somebody who's, connected to the spiritual realm and grounds themselves regularly, I think of Alex Jones right off the top.
What's really useful for getting in touch with the spiritual realm is when your career sort of flatlines because of sort of reputational damage and
financial
you have to
damage.
become an asset to like sort of, let's say, Cantor Fitzgerald Acquisition Corporation number 6, also known as a Rumble.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Jones there, but
no,
talk about both of them.
No, but but let's be clear. There is it is a measure of like just where you've come when you become like when you basically are using Alex Jones as a sort of glide path to enhance your audience.
It's hard to know who's doing who a favor here.
Well, that's true. But I do think I remember when Greenwald was doing a so-called interview, which was basically a publicity junket. I'm sorry. I've been to film festivals. I know exactly what goes on when you interview a subject of a documentary afterwards. And also say...
compliment him on his appearance?
Well, just, you could be complimentary, but to say specifically, like, my big controversy here is I'm not going to ask you the obvious questions that a journalist would ask you here because, as some form of defiance, I'm not going to ask you about the fact that you just, that you are a...
pending judgment about you, about lying about kids.
About, some of the most horrible things anyways. But anyways, it is interesting thing to mark because, Alex Jones is a freak, and there's always, I guess, some titillating aspect to having freaks on. But to pretend it's anything other than that, and to sort of like try and garner this guy's sort of ailing empire, of audience. It's pretty embarrassing. And with that said, I give you Russell Brand and Alex Jones.
I feel like you have suffered a lot, and I feel that you have a lot of power in you. And I wonder how you align.
Stop it. So, can I just say, like, I would love for Sam to be talked to by Russell Brand in that exact same way.
Yeah.
You've suffered a lot. You have
You have a lot of power
in
in you.
Yeah. It's about
I feel
time
like-
somebody did.
You have suffered a lot, and I feel that you have a lot of power in you. And I wonder how you align the necessity for surrender in order that we may convey a great, ever-present, omnipresent, omniscient wisdom accessible to all of us if we are clear, with your own rather robust individualism. I wonder if you ever feel fracture and crisis within yourself. I wonder if even under attack you've ever thought about ending your own life. I wonder if you've ever been concerned that you are mentally ill. I wonder if you've ever felt hopeless and desperate given the escalation of these crises and the way that you have been attacked.
You know, God does things to me. I'll just say this. I'm not trying to brag. It's just you asked the question. I'll wake up at 3:35 in the morning or whenever it is. And God will say, the Spirit will say to me.
Pause. Can I just say one thing? Like, you know, we've had guests on this show, well, at least one I can think of, who I felt like after the interview, I'm like, that person is mentally and emotionally unstable. And you know, had I had that idea beforehand, I wouldn't have invited them on, because I just don't, it's obviously not healthy for them. And it's not like, what's the point of that?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Russell Brand, in asking that question, is acknowledging, I think you're a little bit off, mentally off, as some way of like, sort of like, but you know what? Why are you having him on?
I'm going to say, yeah,
Like,
if you
where's
need guidance in this, you don't want to be hearing from Alex Jones and
What's
Russell Brand.
what's the value though? Like, what is the value? Like, I mean, you know, honestly, like, particularly if you are out there trying to sort of espouse political ideology and, you know, being a truth teller, if you think this guy is emotionally unstable and is, you know, potentially suicidal, like, what are we to learn from this? Like, what is it that you're doing here?
Well, he's trying to essentially, I mean, I take it in a way that's almost congratulatory towards Jones. Like, the weight of the things that you have uncovered must be so heavy, and the response that you've gotten from the public is just so much to bear. Have you ever thought about taking your own life? Because, by the way, you have a $1 billion judgment against you, and that's not going away anytime soon.
It's also, you know, to perceive that as an attack.
Right.
It'll be really like, you know, when you're found liable for lying about something like that and ruining the lives of people, it's a little bit weird to perceive that as an attack.
But they're loose colleagues at this point, right? Because
That's
Alex
it.
Jones is doing regular appearances on Crowder's program on Rumble.
They're part of the same stable. They're stablemates now. But yeah, it's like, I mean, that's how I would talk. Like, I wouldn't ask Ilan Pappy if he would have considered suicide, but I'm like, you've been through a lot. Would you like to reflect on that a little bit?
Yeah, well,
let's talk to Alex Jones about that.
Right. I mean, yeah, Ilan Pappy has, like, there's a reason why you bring on somebody like that, because they have, like, you know, there's some like knowledge to impart.
Wisdom, yeah.
Does anybody really think that Alex Jones has some type of insight into something?
Well,
I mean,
Besides
he's now
audience?
he's now found his third eye, you know.
I found my third eye. I know a lot about trying to hide assets from a judgment. That is one of the things I could actually give some advice on. I haven't fully perfected it.
What is his answer again? I forget.
Go ahead. Let's go.
That's the question. I'll wake up at 3:35 in the morning or whenever it is, and God will say, the Spirit will say to me, you know, I'm completely real.
Whoopsie.
I want you to get up and walk into the kitchen, and it is going to be 3:36.
And I want you to form your LLC in Wyoming.
This has happened to me hundreds of times, since I was a little kid. And I walk in, and it's always the exact number. Now, you can say, well, I've got an inner clock, whatever.
Yeah.
We know that butterflies can fly from central Mexico all the way to central Canada and then lay their eggs and then fly all the way back. How does it know how to go to Mexico? Well, how does it know how to go 3,000 miles? It knows how to do it, or 2,800 miles. Seen documentaries on it. It has magnetic cones and rods in its little tiny brain that operate off the electromagnetic fields of the Earth, but they also have ancestral memory as well that's been passed on. And so
It's the magnetics.
their bodies are a third dimensional manifestation
You don't think it's
of that
ancestral?
spirit energy. And so that energy is even in them. That's how the ducks, the geese know how to do it. That's how hummingbirds can fly from Georgia all the way to Guatemala, little bitty birds over the ocean, thousands of miles, and land in the same tree that they were born in, or the same tree that their parents were born in. Okay? So that's the power of this. That's and all
Sir, this is
spiritualism
and,
is tuning into the fact that
I lie about the same killing of a bunch of kids that my parents did. Like, what is this? What are we talking about? Well, how is this?
I have a third eye.
Yeah.
How does this map onto his experience?
Well, you got to let him finish.
humans have massive amounts of cones and rods. The only other thing that has more of them is whales. I mean, the dolphin's brain's way bigger than a human's, and they're incredible. And so you have to understand that we have all this. We're a transceiver, and the priest class has tried to get in front of this relationship with the universe and God, and then they create these dogmas to control people instead of going directly to God.
Stay free.
That's it? Oh, this was
That
the
was it, yeah.
promotional clip that Russell Brand put out.
Rods and cones are in the eyeball. And
Yeah,
they're
that's
about-
exactly
yeah.
what
they're attached
I was
by-
thinking about.
I love the idea. I love the idea that butterflies have ancestral memory.
Yeah, right.
Well,
they
like,
have
it's like-
generational trauma.
You reference to like their sort of like internal, like the geospatial awareness with regards to like magnetics and stuff like that, and then also say, also their memories live in their cells.
Right.
It's like, no, it's not that.
I mean, honestly, it really is like the two steps away from Scientology, right? Where like you have another
Two?
being living within you. I mean, honestly, one step away, or maybe worse.
Scientology makes more sense than this. Like he's like you've been through a lot of public, and I'm not endorsing Scientology.
Yeah.
But you've been through a lot. How have you gotten through it? It's like, well, I think of how birds migrate to South America.
Well, I mean, if what you're saying about the rods and cones being in your eye is applicable here, perhaps he's talking about his whole body becoming a third eye, and you too can have this experience if you buy my supplement, Brain Force or whatever.
Unbelievable.
That's the spiritual
I like how
experience.
dogma can get in the way of the hardware that can tap into the fundamental truth of the universe and the rods and cones in our brains.
Yeah.
Like it just takes a little bit of a media flim-flam to get in the way of those like things apparently we have in our brain.
Also,
One of the ways, incidentally, I should say, in hiding your assets is also through magnetics.
Spirituality
Gotta block the
does
rods and
not-
cones of the asset evaluators.
Spirituality does not equal narcissism. Just a pro tip for people who might be consuming Russell Brand or Alex Jones. Spirituality is a separate thing that does not have to do with like your own delusions of grandeur.
The reason why I set up shell companies in Wyoming and then filtered that through an estate that I set up in an offshore account is because of ancestral memories that forced me to do that. I had no idea I was even doing it.
The magnets draw him to the Cayman Islands.
Well, the magnets do that partly, but mostly it's more like ancestral memories guide me to this type of financial structure to evade a judgment.
Like the tree where
Ancestral
his
memory.
father was born in.
Yes.
My rods and cones are lighting up, and I think these kids are crisis actors.
I returned to the same offshore account that my parents had. Folks, that is our phone portion of the program. A couple IMs, and then we'll get out of here because ESVN starts in just moments away, more or less. 60
Hour.
moments. State and Rock. Get a harness with a front clip really helps with the young dogs pulling the leash.
I have a harness. It's still a struggle right now, but we're working on it. I will survive this next week.
Juniper J. Panama and Ecuador use the U.S. dollar as their currency. I'm not sure that part for Argentina is a bad idea.
It's better than Bitcoin, at least.
Yes. Dimension sympathizer. Oh my God! Stop saying pecans. pecan is literally an Algonquin word and it's pronounced pecan. If you don't believe me, Google pecan and pronunciation. Well, I believe you, but I don't.
It's the Sam we're talking
I
about.
don't subscribe to pronunciation rules.
How authoritarian of you.
I don't do that. Dan from Columbus, if Sam keeps this Alex Jones bit up, his voice might get stuck, or he just might not have one tomorrow. Honks me off. My wife occasionally will talk about a type of shrimp that can see hundreds of more colors than us, but I don't think she's built that into her worldview. Hot Labradoro. Ooh, Labrador. Hot labor doll. Sorry, Sam, I can't support nuts.com. I source all my nuts from Grindr for anyone else who needs to find nuts for cheap for free. Okay. People say you can't beat locally. So, okay. Stephen from Pittsburgh. It could be argued there was also domestic political leverage that Zionists had in that British politics was looking for an easy out to deal with domestic anti-Semitism. Project to get Jews to willingly immigrate away helped solve that without having to actually challenge anti-Semitism. Yeah, I think that came up. Balfour was pretty anti-Semitic. How do you not have a dog collar or a dog leash with the phrase, pause it, I'll take my commission in Trump coin, please? That's a good idea. Dope Hope. That's a good idea. We need a dog leash that says pause it. Or a dog collar that says pause it. Majority Report. That would be great. Dog parks. Great. Julie, get on it. Dope Hope. Sam, I'm being told pro-Christmas delegations are prepared to launch thermonuclear lawsuits against the Majority Report if it does not stop its relentless war on Christmas. Maybe tomorrow we will play, or no, maybe we'll play that when we return. When it's really Christmas season, we can get.
What did Putin call the invasion? A limited military something? Or whatever?
Operation.
Yeah, we're going to do that to Thanksgiving.
Maddie the Boy, one of the best interviews of the year. Great guest. Oh, incidentally, start sending us your best of suggestions. We got 5 or 6, I think, this year that we're going to be doing. Kowalski from Nebraska. I've got a 76-year-old neighbor who has been slowly having to sell his small farm because his wife lives in an assisted living center and Medicaid doesn't kick in until after their net assets fall below $2,000, I think. Unfortunately, he will not be able to leave anything to his children because of this, and his wife feels so bad, but she would prefer to be dead and not be such a burden, which I can tell has been emotionally hard on my neighbors. Such BS. Yes, it's absolutely. I mean, it's the case. We don't. 2/3 of our elderly are in nursing homes, being paid for by Medicaid. It depends on which state in terms of like what their asset rules. It changes state to state, but it's horrible. We have no system for this. We have no system for this. No system. And of course, this also ends up being, to be clear, an issue of wealth inequality. Because if you're not able to have afforded long-term care insurance, which is prohibitively expensive, unless you're really wealthy, or you're wealthy enough to afford whatever it is, 15, 20,000. I mean, it depends on where you are. Month care. You have no ability to pass on assets to your kids. It's really horrible. Dave the Trade. Hey crew, this is the I Am, or formerly known as Custodial Artist here. There's a new season of Fiasco by Leon Nefka and about the NYC 1984 subway Vigilanti. The first 2 episodes left me waiting for more. I uploaded the Tim Pool whoopsie GIF to Tenor, so on most apps it can be found. And lastly, my big live t-shirt is still going strong, not faded or torn. Sam, you know your shirt. Left is best. Thank you.
Nice.
All right, 3 more. Our Rivdrem. The holidays have started early. Alex Jones has a video game. There's also a trailer linked in the webpage. You can be seen on Rumble. Yeah. Mark Monkey. I feel like calling it a tent camp sounds a little wrong. What would you call a camp where you concentrate a bunch of people of the same nationality, religion, whatever, in one place while a bunch of them are being systematically killed. It's on the tip of my tongue. And the final I am of the day. Let's see. Chris Burdick. It's not the O in opossum is silent. It's just the Americans don't bother with it. Possum is an informal nickname. Bradley, Matt, Emma, good job today. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I get some